Mm. Hello, hello. So good to see you all. How's it going? How are you? I am very thirsty today. And I feel like I've been drinking more water than I usually have. I'm just still like extremely thirsty. So, here we go. Captain Hardship, is so good to see you. Hello, hello. Star, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. I know that I will need to extend the days because it says that there's only 6 days left, but we are not doing a Sunday stream until the end of June, so plenty of time. Plenty of time. Falcor, hello, good to see you. Hi, hi, hi. So good. Okay. Did anybody watch the Summer Games Fest? We just watched it. And there's not too many games that I'm excited for. I don't know. I'm excited for Sonic. You caught the end of it? Yeah, I'm excited for Sonic. I'm excited for what is it called? The Lie of P. Um, oh, and there was another one that I was really excited for. I don't remember what it was, but it looked really good. And I can't tell you anything about it. But yeah, so a couple games that I'm excited for. Most of them I'm just like, this is not for me. And that's okay because I don't need to, doesn't need to be for me every time. Okay, so I have a stack of books in front of me that I'm gonna quickly talk about. So I am traveling this weekend. I'm going to a graduation party, and it's only gonna be for a couple days. So why do I feel the need to have so many books with me? I don't know. But okay, so these are the books that I have in front of me that I'm like, I can make room. Okay, so this one, My Murder by Katie Williams, I started it last week. It just came out on June 6th, and I will be reading it tomorrow during reading sprints, which means I'm going to be really close to finishing it. So it's like, I should just bring it and finish it. So I'm going to be bringing this one. And then I'm already reading The Left Hand of Darkness, because that one's not going to take me very long. So I think I'm going to bring The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm already reading it. I'm on page 81. There's 252 pages. Very doable. Maybe. And then I got two other books from the library today and yesterday. Um, I finished Akira Volume 4, so I have the fifth one here. I'm probably not going to bring this one just because it's it's big and like I can just read it when I get back. There's no rush since I just got it. And I have Lessons in Chemistry by, oh, sorry for the glare, by Bonnie Garmis. I'm reading this because it was rated as a reader's choice for 2022 for best debut, I think. I think. I have no idea what it's about, but I'm reading it. And this is the large type version because gotta save my little eyeball sometimes. The Left Hand of Darkness sounds like a badass villain name. It totally does. It totally does. I'd believe it. Like that, it's such a good name. So those are the books. I didn't say what any of them were about, but that's fine. You don't need to know. uh, so I'm trying to narrow it down. And I'm bringing a craft project for my downtime. This is all for the weekend, yes. Realistically, I'm probably not going to get to any of them. But, but what if I do? You know? What if I do? Yep, and I have a craft project for the downtime in between reading. They are very real concerns. Yes, thank you for that validation. You're going to a party and need downtime activities. Yeah, some party. I mean, it's a graduation party. It's not like, and I'm not the one graduating, so I don't have to be the center of attention. I'll just be in the corner. Exactly. I'll just be in the corner, me, my 4 books, and my craft. And I'm perfectly fine with it. So, but today, a book that I am not bringing, Don Quixote. We are starting at chapter 49, and I'm so excited because I think there is, well, we're less than 200 pages away from finishing, so that's exciting. Um, I'm looking to see how many chapters there are. There's the pressure. I keep my fingers don't want to turn the pages. Okay, there's 74 chapters. Yeah, 74 chapters. So just carry it with you to assert dominance. Say congrats and read The Left Hand of Darkness while ignoring everybody and the awesome food trend. Yeah. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I need to position myself easy access to food, but when you do that, that also means that people will come up and like talk to you and stuff because you're right by the food. These are the issues. I need to bring like a tray and just load up enough for several hours, probably even more, and then take my tray with me. Befriend a child to be your food servant. Oh my gosh. Yes, I need a little bell. Food servant. Excuse me. Hey Wadsworth, how's it going? Good to see you. Honey Lemon, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. Oof. It's chunky. Wadsworth, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. Okay. No. I I looked over here at Falcor. Thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. I looked over here and I saw my Kindle and I was like, "Oh, yeah, there's a couple books on there. What am I doing? Why am I like this? I don't need that. I don't need to bring that. I need a poncho to fetch your things." Yes, while I read fantasy novels. I mean, why is that so hard to ask? I don't understand. Why is that so much? It's not too much. Just bring your Kindle. Yeah, but these books aren't on my Kindle. I feel the judgment. I feel the judgment. You know, the fact that I admitted that I have a Kindle, but at the same time bringing 4 physical books. I know. I know. Thank you. Thank you. Mm. Okay. Today. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm so strong. I just like jostled the whole table. All right. Today, we are starting chapter 49. What happened last time? We have 2 separate stories now. Sancho and Don Quixote are separated for the first time since they've been together. It's very sad, but not really. Sancho is now playing governor of this insula that the Duke and Duchess have set up, and they just like let not everybody in the area know, but like enough people in the area know to just like play along, to just go along with this and fall into this fantasy, like blah blah blah. So for his adventures, he has had to listen to several grievances, and they're all grievances that have happened elsewhere and have been recorded. So he knows the answers to all of them and how to like suss out like who should win, things like that. Um but everybody thinks that he's like super smart, which is very like out of character for Sancho to be like so clever in his ideas. Um, and what else did he do? He did some, oh, and then he got a letter from the Duke that said that his life is in danger and people are coming to raid his insula and like kill him. Is that it? That might be it. That might be it with him. Just don't act like Don Quixote while at the party. No one will like it if you unleash lions into the crowd to fight. Maybe just don't act like Don Quixote in general. Alright, fine. That was my plan, but fine. Now I need to change my outfit. So I think that's all that's going on with Sancho. And then with Don Quixote, he has this one maiden is like madly in love with him, but not really because the Duke and Duchess have set all of this up. And so like one night she's like singing right below his window about how much she loves him and about like how beautiful she is and could never be with somebody like him, blah 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 blah. And that's the thing. Don Quixote is like, why does everybody love me? Oh, it's such a curse that I can't just be with Dulcinea of Toboso. Everybody must love me, blah blah blah. And like throws himself onto the bed. Oh my gosh, son, thank you so much for the follow. Hello, welcome in. Um, and then another prank is there were a bunch of cats with bells on them, and they just start fighting, and it's like a whole ruckus, and it was supposed to be a like playful little prank. Nobody was supposed to get hurt, but of course Don Quixote gets hurt. A cat starts attacking him, and he just like gets clawed all over his face. And so he has to recover for like 8 days. They like bandaged him up and he's like in bed this whole time. And one of the nights, Doña Rodriguez comes and they both scare each other, which I think is hilarious. And they're in discussion, and Doña has sort of like a quest for Don Quixote. And then weird things happen. She drops her candlestick, and so like it's completely dark now. And then somebody like attacks her, and Don Quixote doesn't do anything. Um, to like help her or stop it or anything like that. He just hopes that, that he doesn't get attacked. But of course he's attacked. And for 30 minutes, he's being pinched. And I don't understand why for 30 minutes. That seems unnecessary on both people's part. One, to be pinching somebody for 30 minutes. That's far too much work. But two, like, are you just laying there? Are you fighting people off? Like, what are you, 30 minutes? You couldn't get up and leave? Like, I don't understand. But I think that might be the last thing. Let's see. That happened. Yes, it is. That was the last thing that happened. So we'll see. In the chapters we are going, it's like Sancho, Don Quixote, Sancho, Don Quixote, blah 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 blah. So that's where we're at. I know, the cats. Generally good advice, but she might become the life of the party if she runs around half naked with a bowl on her head, calling it a helmet. That's true. It's very true. I will make a lot of friends. Oh my god. I'm probably not gonna do that though. Or if I just like destroy wine skins, thinking that they are giants. I'm sure that will make me a lot of friends. Duddy, hello, so good to see you. Honey lemon donkey hote. Exactly. Okay, let's do it. Chapter 49. Regarding what befell Sancho Panza as he patrolled his insula. We left the great governor angry and annoyed at the sly painter of a farmer who had been instructed by the steward, and the steward by the duke, to to ridicule Sancho. But he stood his ground with all of them, even though he was foolish, unpolished, and plump. And he said to those who were with him, and to Dr. Pedro Recio, who had come back into the room once the secret matter of the Duke's letter was concluded. That's right. Okay, so this doctor was standing next to Sancho, and every time, and there's like a bunch of food out on the table, and every time Sancho went to like eat it, he would push it away. Like the doctor would be like, no, you can't have this. No, this is bad for your health, like that sort of thing. And it was like literally everything on the table he wouldn't allow him to eat. There needs to be a modern remake, yes, or someone who reads Quixote as seriously as Tiki reads Tales of Knights and unironically thinks Don Quixote is the guy to imitate. Yes, I would read and or watch that. Okay. Now, I can really understand that judges and governors must be, or should be, made of bronze so they don't feel the demands of petitioners who at all hours and in every season want them to listen and attend only to their petitions and to take care of them, come what may. And if the poor judge doesn't listen to them and take care of them, either because he can't or because it isn't the time set aside for giving audiences, then they curse him and slander him and gnaw at his bones and even have things to say about his family. Foolish, thoughtless petitioner. Don't be in a hurry. Wait for the right time and occasion to make your petition. Don't come when it's time to eat or sleep, for judges are flesh and blood, and they must give to their natures when they naturally demand. Except for me. I don't give mine anything to eat, thanks to our Dr. Pedro Recio, Tertea Fuera, here present, who wants me to die of hunger, and who claims that this kind of death is life. May God grant the same to him and to all those of his kind. I mean bad doctors. The good ones deserve palms and laurels. All who knew Sancho Panza were amazed to hear him speak so elegantly, and they did not know how to account for it, except for the fact that serious offices and responsibilities either strengthen the mind or make it torpid. Finally, Dr. Pedro Recio de Aguera de Tirteafuera promised to give him supper that night, even if that exceeded all the aphorisms of Hippocrates. This made the governor happy, and he waited very impatiently for night and the supper hour to arrive, and although time, it seemed to him, stood still, not moving from the spot, yet the longed-for moment arrived, and for supper he was served salpicon of beef with onion and some stewed calves' feet that were a little past their prime. And there is a note after salpicon, and it says, a dish of chopped meat flavored with salt, pepper, vinegar, onion, and sometimes oil and anchovies. I don't want the anchovies, thank you. He gave himself up to all of it with more pleasure than if they had served him partridge from Milan, pheasants from Rome, veal from Sorrento, quail from Moron, or geese from Lavajos. And during his supper he turned to the doctor and said, look, Senor Doctor, from now on, don't bother about giving me delicate or exquisite things to eat, because that will drive my stomach out of its mind. It's used to goat, beef, bacon, dried meats, turnips, and onions, and if by any chance it's given palace dishes, it gets finicky, and sometimes even sick. What the butler can do is bring me what are called ollas podridas, and the more rotten they are, the better they smell, and he can pack them and fill them with anything he likes as long as it's food, and I'll thank him for it and repay him someday. But don't let anybody try to trick me, because we either are or we aren't. Let's all live and eat in peace and good friendship, because when God sends the dawn, it's dawn for everybody. And there is a note after ollas podridas, and it says, as indicated earlier, this is a traditional Spanish stew. Podrida literally means rotten or putrid. Mmm. And that was something else. Sancho has been warned not to eat food because people close to him may be trying to kill him. I'll govern this insula without forsaking the law or taking a bribe, and let everybody keep his eye open and tend to his own affairs. Because I want you to know that the devil makes trouble everywhere, and if you give me a chance, you'll see marvels, and if you turn into honey, the flies will eat you. Certainly, Signor Governor, said the butler. Your Grace is correct in everything you have said, and I offer, in the name of all the insulanos of this insula, to serve your Grace with all promptness, love, and benevolence, because the gentle form of governing that your Grace has shown from the very beginning does not allow us to do or think anything that would redound to your Grace's disservice. I believe that, responded Sancho, and they would be fools if they did or thought anything else. And I say again that care should be taken with my feeding and the feeding of my donkey, which is what matters and is most important in this business. When it's time, we'll all go on patrol, and for it's my intention to clear this insula of all kinds of filth, as well as people who are vagrants, idlers, and sluggards, because I want you to know, my friends, that shiftless, lazy people are to the nation what drones are to the hive. They eat the honey that the worker bees produce. I intend to favor those who labor, maintain the privileges of the gentry, reward the virtuous, and, above all, respect religion and the honor of the clergy. What do you think of this, my friends? Have I just said something, or am I racking my brain of nothing? Your Grace had said so much, Signor Governor, said the steward, that I'm amazed to see a man as unlettered as your Grace, who, I believe, has no letters at all, saying so many things full of wisdom and good counsel, far beyond what was expected of your Grace's intelligence by those who sent us here, and by those who came here with you. Every day we see new things in the world. Deceptions become the truth, and deceivers find themselves deceived. Night arrived, and the governor had supper with the permission of Dr. Recio. They prepared to go on patrol, and the governor went out with the steward, the secretary, the butler, the chronicler, who was charged with recording his deeds, and so many bailiffs and scribes they could have formed a medium-sized squadron. Sancho was in the middle of it, holding his staff, and it was a sight to see. And when they had gone down a few streets, they heard sounds of a dispute. They hurried to the spot and found only two men fighting. Seeing the law approach, the men stood still, and one of them said, "Here, over here, in the name of God and the king, how can you allow people to be robbed in the middle of town and assaulted in the middle of the street?" "Calm down, my good man," said Sancho, "and tell me the reason for the fighting, for I am the governor." The other man said, "Signor Governor, I'll tell you as briefly as I can. Your Grace should know that this gentleman has just won more than 1,000 reales in the gambling house across the way. God knows how. I happened to be present, and going against the dictates of my conscience, I judged more than one doubtful play in his favor. He left the game with his winnings, and though I expected him to give me at least an escudo for a tip, which is usual and customary for important men like me, who determine if things have been done well or badly, and confirm if there has been an injustice, and avoid disputes, he put his money in his pocket and left the house. I came after him, indignant, and with kind and courteous words I asked him to give me even 8 reales, for he knows I am an honorable man and have no money and no work, because my parents didn't leave me anything or teach me a trade, and this scoundrel, who's a bigger thief than Cacus and a bigger cheat than Andradillo, didn't want to give me more than 4 reales, and now your Grace can see, Senor Governor, how little shame he has, and how little conscience. By my faith, if your Grace hadn't come by, I would have made him give up his winnings and taught him a good lesson." And there is a note after Andradilla, and it says, "The identity of Andradilla is not known. A note in Shelton's translation identifies him as, quote, some famous cheater in Spain," end quote. But as Martin de Rocourt says, this clarifies nothing. "What do you say to this?" asked Sancho. And the other man responded that what his adversary said was true. He had not wanted to give him more than 4 reales, because he had given him that amount many times, and those who expected a tip to have to be well-mannered and take what is given to them with a smile, and not demand explanations from the winners, unless they know for certain that they are cheats, and our winnings are ill-gotten gains, and as a sign that he was an honest man and not a thief, as the other man said. There was no better proof than his not wanting to give him anything, because cheats always have to pay tribute to the onlookers who know them. I am Signate. Hello, welcome in. So good to see you. Thank you so much for the follow. That's true, said the steward. Senor Governor, your grace will have to decide what ought to be done with these men. What ought to be done is this, responded Sancho. You, the winner, good, bad, or indifferent, must give your opponent 100 reales, and another 30 to the poor men in prison. And you who have no money and no work and are not needed on this insula, take the 100 reales and leave this insula by tomorrow. You're banished for 10 years. And if you come back before then, you'll finish your sentence in the next life, because I'll hang you from the gallows, or at least the hangman will, on my orders, and let no one reply, or he'll feel my hand. That escalated very quickly. One man paid, the other received. The latter left the insula, the former went home, and the governor remained, saying, Now, either I'm mistaken or I'm going to close down these gambling houses, because it seems clear to me that they're very harmful. Your grace won't be able to close down this one, at least, said the scribe, because it's owned by a very important person, and what he loses every year at cards is incomparably more than what he wins. Your grace can show your power against other gambling dens of less distinction, which are the ones that do more harm and harbor more outrages. In the houses of high-born gentlemen and nobles, the notorious cheats don't dare to use their tricks, and since the vice of gambling has become so widespread, it's better to gamble in distinguished houses than in those of workmen, where they keep a poor wretch for half the night and skin him alive. Now, scribe, said Sancho, I know there's a lot to say about this. At that moment a constable came up to them, holding a young man, and he said, Senor Governor, this lad was coming toward us, and as soon as he saw that we were the law, he turned his back and began to run like a deer, a sign that he must be a criminal. I went after him, and if he hadn't tripped and fallen, I never would have caught him. Why were you running away? Asked Sancho, to which the young man responded, Senor, to avoid answering all the questions that constables ask. What is your trade? A weaver. And what do you weave? The iron tips of lances, with your grace's kind permission. Are you being funny with me? Are you proud of being a joker? Fine. Where are you going now? Senor, to take the air. And where do you take the air on this insula? Wherever it blows. Good. Your answers are right to the point. You're clever, boy. But you should know that I'm the air, and I'm blowing at your back and sending you to prison. You there, seize him and take him away, and I'll make him sleep without any air tonight. By God, said the young man, your grace will make me sleep in prison when you make me king? And why can't I make you sleep in prison? Responded Sancho. Don't I have the power to arrest you and let you go whenever I want? No matter how much power your grace has, said the young man, it won't be enough to make me sleep in prison. You think so? Replied Sancho. Take him away now to the place where he'll see the truth with his own eyes, no matter how much the warden tries to use self-interested generosity with him. I'll find the warden 2,000 ducados if he lets you take one step out of prison. All this is laughable, responded the young man. The fact is that every man alive today won't make me sleep in prison. Tell me, you demon, said Sancho, do you have an angel who will take you out and remove the iron that I plan to put on you? Now, Senor Governor, the young man responded with great charm, let's use our reason and come to the point. Suppose, your grace, that you order me taken to prison, and there I'll put in irons and chains, and placed in a cell, and the warden will suffer great penalties if he lets me out, and he obeys every order you give him. Even so, if I don't want to sleep and stay awake the whole night without closing my eyes, is all your grace's power enough to make me sleep if I don't want to? No, of course not, said the secretary, and the man has proven his point. Which means, said Sancho, that you wouldn't sleep simply because it's your will not to, not because you want to go against mine. No, senor, said the young man, I wouldn't dream of that. Well then, said Sancho, go with God back to your house to sleep, and may God give you a sound sleep, for I don't want to rob you of that, but I do advise that from now on you don't mock the law, because you may come across a constable who will take the joke out of your hide. The young man left, and the governor continued on his patrol, and in a little while 2 constables came along holding a man, and they said, Señor Governor, this person who looks like a man isn't one. She's a woman, and not an ugly one, and she's dressed in men's clothing. They raised 2 or 3 lanterns up to her eyes, and in their light they saw the face of a woman who seemed to be 16 years old, perhaps a little older, with her hair caught up in a net of gold and green silk, and as beautiful as 1,000 pearls. They looked at her from head to toe and saw that she was wearing stockings of scarlet silk, with garters of white taffeta edged in gold and seed pearls. Her breeches were green, made of cloth of gold, as was her jacket of loose coat, under which she wore a doublet of a very fine gold and white cloth, and her men's shoes were white. On her belt she did not wear a sword, but a richly decorated dagger, and on her fingers there were many precious rings. In short, everyone thought the girl was lovely, and no one recognized her, and the residents of the village said they could not think who she might be, and those who were privy to the tricks that were being played on Sancho were the ones who were most bewildered, because they had not arranged this incident and discovery, and so they were in doubt, waiting to see how the matter would turn out. Sancho was amazed at the girl's beauty, and he asked her who she was, where she was going, and what had moved her to dress in those clothes. She, her eyes lowered in modesty and shame, responded, I cannot, señor, say publicly what it has been so important for me to keep secret, but I want one thing understood. I am not a thief or a wicked person, but an unfortunate maiden forced by the power of jealousy to break from the decorum owed to modesty. Hearing this, the steward said to Sancho, Señor Governor, have those other people move away so the lady can say whatever she wishes with less embarrassment. The governor so ordered, and everyone moved away except the steward, the butler, and the secretary. When they were alone, the maiden continued, saying, Señores, I am the daughter of Pedro Perez Mazorca, the tax collector for wool in this village, who often comes to my father's house. This doesn't make sense, Señora, said the steward, because I know Pedro Perez very well, and I know he has no children, male or female. And besides, you say he's your father, and then you add that he often comes to your father's house. I noticed that too, said Sancho. Now, señores, I'm very upset, and I don't know what I'm saying, responded the maiden. But the truth is that I'm the daughter of Diego de Llana, whom all of your graces must know. Now that makes sense, responded the steward, for I know Diego de la Llana, and I know he's a distinguished gentleman and very rich, and that he has a son and a daughter, and since he was widowed, there's no one in the entire village who can say he's seen the face of his daughter, for he keeps her so secluded, not even the sun can see her. And, even so, the rumor is that she's extremely beautiful. That is true, responded the maiden, and I'm that daughter, and you, señores, can say now if the rumor about my beauty is false or not, for you have seen me. And then she began to weep most hideously. Seeing this, the secretary leaned toward the butler's ear and said very quietly, "There can be no doubt that something important has happened to the poor maiden, because in these clothes and at this hour, and being a gentlewoman, she's not in her house." "No doubt about it," responded the butler, "and her tears confirm your suspicion." Sancho consoled her with the best words he knew, and asked her to have no fear, and tell them what had happened to her, and all of them would attempt very earnestly to remedy it in every way possible. "The fact is, señores," she responded, "that my father has kept me secluded for 10 years, the same amount of time my mother has been in the ground. At home, Mass is said in a magnificent oratory, and in all this time I have not seen more than the sun in the sky during the day, and the moon and stars at night. And I don't know what streets or squares or temples or even men look like, except for my father and a brother of mine, and Pedro Perez, the tax collector. And because he normally comes to my house, I had the idea of saying he was my father in order not to reveal who mine really is. This seclusion, and my father's refusal to allow me to leave the house, not even to go to church, have made me very unhappy for many long days and months. I would like to see the world, or at least the village where I was born, and it seemed to me that this desire did not go against the decorum that well-born maidens ought to deserve. When I heard that people had bullfights and cane fights and put on plays, I asked my brother, who is a year younger than I am, to tell me what those things were, as well as many other things I had not seen. He told me in the best way he could, but this only inflamed my desire to see them. There's a note after cane fights, and it says, "A battle game played on horseback with canes instead of lances." Nomad, so good to see you. Hello, welcome in. Finally, to shorten the tale of my perdition, I'll say that I begged and pleaded with my brother, and I wish I never had begged and pleaded for anything. And she began to cry. The steward said to her, "Your grace should continue, señora, and finish telling us what has happened, for your words and your tears have us all in suspense." "I have few words left to say," responded the maiden, "but many tears to weep, because badly placed desires cannot bring any reduction, only more of the same." And there is a note after reduction, and it says, "It was a commonplace, when people suffered a misfortune, to say that it helped reduce the numbers of sin they would have to atone for." The maiden's beauty had left its mark on the butler's soul, and once more he raised his lantern in turn to see her again, and it seemed to him she was shedding not tears, but seed pearls, or the dew on the meadows, and he exalted them even higher, and compared them to oriental pearls, and he hoped her misfortune was not as great as her tears and sighs seemed to indicate. The governor was becoming impatient at the length of time it took the girl to tell her history, and he told her not to keep them in suspense any longer, for it was late, and they still had a good part of the town to patrol. She, between interrupted sobs and broken sighs, said, "My misfortune and my misery are simply that I asked my brother to let me dress as a man in some of his clothes, and to take me out one night to see the village while our father was sleeping. He, besieged by my pleas, agreed, and he gave me these clothes and dressed me himself in some of mine. Which suited him as if he had been born to them, because he doesn't have a beard yet, and looks exactly like a very beautiful maiden. And tonight, about an hour ago, more or less, we left the house, and guided by our young and foolish thoughts, we walked all around the village. When we wanted to return home, we saw a great crowd of people coming toward us, and my brother said to me, 'Sister, this must be a patrol. Put wings on your feet and run with me, so they won't recognize us, for that will not be in our favor.' And saying this, he turned, and I won't say he began to run, but fly. Before I had taken 6 steps, I fell. I was so frightened, and then the officer of the law came and brought me before your graces, where, because I am wicked and capricious. I find myself shamed before so many people." "And so, Señora," said Sancho, "no other misfortune has happened to you, not even the jealousy you mentioned at the beginning of your story, to bring you out of your house?" "Nothing has happened to me, and jealousy didn't bring me out, but only my desire to see the world, which didn't go beyond seeing the streets of this town." And the truth of what the maiden had said was confirmed by the arrival of constables holding her brother, whom one of them had overtaken when he ran from his sister. He wore a rich skirt and a shawl of blue damask, with fine gold passementerie, and no headdress or any other adornment on his head except for his hair, which was so blonde and curly it looked like rings of gold. The governor, the steward, and the butler moved to one side of him, and not letting his sister hear what they were saying, they asked him why he was wearing those clothes, and he, with no less shame and embarrassment, told the same story that his sister had told, which brought great joy to the enamored butler. But the governor said, "Certainly, señores, this has been a childish prank, and to tell about this foolishness and daring, there is no need for so many long tears and sighs, just saying, 'We're so-and-so and we left our father's house in disguise to enjoy ourselves, just out of curiosity, for no other reason.' What have been the end of the story with all that sobbing and weeping and carrying on?" "That's true," responded the maiden, "but your graces should know I was upset. I could not be as brief as I should have been." "Nothing's been lost," responded Sancho. "Let's go, and we'll leave your graces at your father's house. Maybe he hasn't missed you. And from now on, don't be so childish, or so eager to see the world. An honorable maiden and a broken leg stay in the house, and a woman and a hen are soon lost when they wander, and a woman who wants to see only wants to be seen. That's all I'll say." That's all I'll say, huh? The boy thanked the governor for his kindness in taking them to their house, and so they set out, for it was not very far. When they arrived, the brother tossed a pebble at the jalousied window, and a maid who had been waiting for them came down immediately and opened the door, and they went in, leaving everyone amazed by their gentility and beauty, and by their desire to see the world at night and without leaving the village. But they attributed it all to their youth. The butler's heart had been pierced, and he resolved to go to the next day and ask the father for her hand, certain he would not be denied, since he was the servant to the duke, and even Sancho had a desire and a wish to marry the boy to his daughter, Sanchica, and he decided to do so when the time came, believing that no husband could be denied the laughter of a governor. With this, the night's patrol ended, and 2 days later the governorship, and with all his plans, were wiped out and destroyed, as we shall see later. So it'll be a short-lived governorship, which we knew. That's the end of chapter 49. Sorry, I didn't say. Okay, so in this one, we're back with Sancho, and he's going out on his patrol to make sure that the insula and the insulanos are safe from any potential invading. And in doing so, we run across a couple people, and one of them is a young girl, about 16, dressed in boys' clothes. And she gives this very long tale, just talking about how her mom died 10 years ago. Her dad has been keeping in their house for the full 10 years, and she doesn't see anything, she doesn't see anybody, and she just wanted to know what life is like outside of her house. So she convinced her brother to let her outside and let her borrow his clothing. Now, why he wore her clothes, I don't know. I feel like he has more than one outfit, so I don't know why he needed to wear her clothes. Maybe he just wanted to. I don't know. It sounded beautiful. I get it. It's like Mulan, except not war. Well said, Duddy. Yes. So they don't really believe her because it is kind of a little unbelievable. But then they run into the brother who is dressed up in her clothing, and he like confirms the story, and Sancho is like, y'all just wasted my time. Like, this is so silly. Let's just take you back home. Maybe your dad didn't even know that you were gone. So they do that. And Sancho, or the butler, like wants to marry the daughter. And we learn at the very end that 2 days later, the governorship, with all of its plans, were wiped out and destroyed. So we'll have to wait and see what that means and how. Let's not judge. You're totally right, Daddy. Let's not judge. All right. Yes, so chapter 50, it does look like we hop back to Don Quixote to see what he's doing. Let's see. Chapter 50, which declares the identities of the enchanters and tormentors who beat the dueña and pinched and scratched Don Quixote, and recounts what befell the page who carried the letter to Teresa Sancha, the wife of Sancho Panza. There's a note after Teresa Sancha, and it says, frequently among the lower classes, a wife was called by the feminine form of her husband's given name. Interesting. This is also the first time that Teresa has been addressed as Teresa Sancha, that I'm aware of anyway. Yeah, I'm just like thinking now. Okay. Because that would be like the equivalent of like if your partner's first name is Daniel, then it would be like Moog Danielle, right? I don't know. Spanish surnames can get complicated. Yeah, yeah. For sure. Well, yeah, and then like the multiple surnames, like keeping your your mother's last name and then your father's last name and like all of the generations that are attached. Wow. Okay. That was a nice sidebar. Chapter 50. Cid Hamate, that most punctilious observer of the smallest details in this true history, says that at the same time Doña Rodriguez left her room to go to Don Quixote's chamber, another dueña, who slept in the same room, heard her, and since all dueñas are fond of knowing, understanding, and inquiring, she followed her so silently that Doña Rodriguez did not know she was there, and as soon as the dueña saw her go into Don Quixote's chamber, and in order not to fail in this widespread custom of all dueñas to be gossips, she went immediately to tell her mistress, the Duchess, that Doña Rodriguez was in Don Quixote's room. Don't forget your second cousin's surname. You can't. Okay, so it sounds like Doña didn't necessarily know that this was going to be happening. She was just sort of pulled into it. Maybe. Okay. The Duchess told the Duke and asked his leave to go with Altisidora to see what that dueña wanted with Don Quixote. The Duke agreed, and the two women, with very cautious and silent steps, approached the door of his room and stood so close they could hear everything that was inside. And when the Duchess heard Doña Rodriguez disclose the Aranjuez of her following issues, she could not bear it, and neither could Altisidora, and so, filled with rage and longing for vengeance, they burst into the room and riddled Don Quixote with wounds and beat the dueña in the manner that has been recounted, because affronts directed against the beauty and vanity of women awaken in them an immense anger and kindle their desire to take revenge. There is a note after Aranjuez of her flowing issues, and it says, Aranjuez is a royal palace famous for its fountains. Fuente is the word for both fountain and issue, which allows the wordplay. Cervantes is just being clever again. The Duchess told the Duke what had happened, which he enjoyed hearing very much, and the Duchess, moving ahead with her intention of deceiving Don Quixote and deriving pleasure from that, dispatched the page who had played the part of Dulcinea in the performance concerning her disenchantment, which Sancho Panza had forgotten in his preoccupation with governing, to Teresa Panza, his wife, with a letter from her husband, and another from her, as well as a long string of fine corals as a present. The history tells us, then, that the page was very clever and witty, and desiring to serve his master and mistress, he left very willingly for Sancho's village. Before entering it, he saw a number of women washing clothes in a stream, and he asked them if they could tell him if a woman named Teresa Panza, the wife of a certain Sancho Panza, who was squire to a knight named Don Quixote of La Mancha, lived in that village. And when he had asked the question, a girl who was washing rose to her feet and said, Teresa Panza is my mother, and Sancho is my father, and that knight is our master. Then come along, my girl, said the page, and take me to your mother, because I have a letter and a present for her from your father. I'll do that very gladly, señor, responded the girl, who looked about 14 years old. And leaving the clothes she was washing with a friend, without covering her head or putting on shoes, though she was barefoot and disheveled, she jumped in front of the page's horse and said, Come, your grace, for our house is at the entrance of the village, and my mother is in it, filled with grief because she hasn't heard anything from my father for so many days. Well, I'm bringing her good news, said the page. No, I thought I could get away with misreading the beginning of the quote, but I can't. Well, I'm bringing her news so good, said the page, that she'll have to give thanks to God for it. Jumping, running, and leaping, the girl finally reached the village, and before entering her house, she called from the door, Come out, Teresa, come out! Mother, come out! Come out, because here's a gentleman who's bringing letters and other things from my good father. Our house in the middle of the street. Exactly. At her call, Teresa Panza, her mother, came out, spinning a bunch of flax and wearing a dun-colored skirt so short it looked as if it had been cut to shame her, a bodice that was also dun-colored, and a chemise. There's a note after shame her, and it says, this was a way of publicly insulting a woman. Interesting. That a way to publicly insult a woman is to cut her skirt short. Huh. I've never heard that before. She was not very old, although she looked over 40, but she was strong, hard, vigorous, and as brown as a hazelnut. And seeing her daughter and the page on horseback, she said, What's this, girl? Who's this gentleman? A servant of my lady Doña Teresa Panza, responded the page. And having said this, he leaped down from the horse and went very humbly to kneel before Señora Teresa, saying, Your Grace, give me your hands, my lady Doña Teresa, which you are the sole legitimate wife of Señor Don Sancho Panza, governor of the insula of Barataria. You've heard of cutting hair but not short skirt. Yeah, it's wild. Oh, Señor, get up, don't do that, responded Teresa. I have nothing to do with palaces. I'm a poor peasant, the daughter of a farmer and a wife of a squire-errant, not of any governor. Doobie Gremlin, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Your Grace, responded the page, is most worthy of a most arch-worthy governor, and to prove the truth, here are a letter and a present for your grace." And he immediately took from his pocket a string of corals with gold beads and put it around her neck, saying, "This letter is from my lord the governor, and another letter, and these corals are from my lady the duchess, who has sent me to your grace." Teresa was stunned, and her daughter no less so, and the girl said, "On my life, our lord and master, Don Quixote, has something to do with this, for he must have given my father the governorship or countship, and that he promised him so often." "That's true," responded the page, "and out of respect for Señor Don Quixote, Señor Sancho is now the governor of the insula of Barataria, as can be seen in this letter." "Your grace must read it to me, señor," said Teresa, "because I know how to spin, but can't read a thing." "Neither can I," added Sanchica. "But wait for me here, and I'll go and find somebody to read it, whether it's the priest himself or Bachelor Sanson Carrasco, and they'll be very happy to come hear news about my father." "You don't have to find anybody, because I know how to spin. I don't know how to spin, but I do know how to read, and I'll read it to you." And so he read her Sancho's entire letter, and since it has already been cited, it is not set down here. And when he took out another letter, the one from the Duchess, and it said, "My friend Teresa, the qualities of goodness and wit in your husband Sancho moved and obliged me to ask my husband, the Duke, to give him the governorship of one of the many insulas which he possesses. I have been told that he governs in grand style, which makes me very happy, and, of course, the Duke, my lord, too, for which I give many thanks to heaven that I was not deceived when I chose him for the governorship, because I want Señora Teresa to know that it is difficult to find a good governor in the world, and may God treat me in just the way that Sancho governs. I am sending you, my dear, a string of corals with gold beads. I'd be happy if they were oriental pearls, but the person who gave you a bone doesn't want to see you dead. One day we shall meet and communicate with each other. God knows when that will be." There is a note after the phrase, "the person who gives you a bone doesn't want to see you dead," and it says, "a saying that seems to mean a person cannot do more than give you what he has." There you go. "Remember me to your daughter, Sanchica, and tell her for me that she should get ready, because I plan to arrange an excellent marriage for her when she least expects it." That sounds terrible. I don't want an arranged marriage when I least expect it. That sounds awful. "I am told that there are fat acorns in your village. Send me about 2 dozen, and I shall esteem them greatly, because they come from your hand. Write me a long letter informing me of your health and well-being. If you happen to need anything, you only have to say the word, and your word will be heeded. May God keep you. From this place, your friend who loves you, the Duchess." "Oh," said Teresa when she heard the letter, "what a good and straightforward and humble lady! Let me bury with the ladies like these, and not the gentlemen women we have in this village who think that, because they're well born, the wind shouldn't touch them, and who go to church with all the airs of queens, and seem to think it's a dishonor to look at a peasant woman. And you can see here where this good lady, even though she's a duchess, calls me her friend and treats me like an equal. And may I see her equal to the highest bell tower in all of La Mancha. And as for the acorns, señor, I'll send her ladyship a salamin of those so fat that people will come just to look at them." And of course, there's a note after salamin, and it says a Castilian dry measure, approximately 4.6 liters, and roughly equivalent to a peck. And for now, Sanchica, look after this gentleman. Take care of his horse, and get some eggs from the stable, and cut plenty of bacon, and let's feed him like a prince. He deserves it for the good news he's brought us and for that nice face of his. In the meantime, I'll go out and tell the news about our luck to my neighbors and to the Reverend Priest and Master Nicholas, the barber, who are and have been such good friends of your father's." "I will, mother," responded Sanchica. "But look, you have to give me half of that necklace, because I don't think my lady the Duchess is so foolish as to send the whole thing to you." "What?" "It's all for you, daughter," responded Teresa, "but let me wear it around my neck for a few days, because it really seems to bring joy to my heart." "You'll both feel joy," said the page, "when you see the package that's in this portmanteau. It's a suit of very fine cloth that the governor wore to the hunt only once, and he sent all of it for Señora Sanchica." "May he live 1,000 years," responded Sanchica, "and the man who brings it not a year less, even 2,000, if that's necessary." Then Teresa left the house, carrying the letters and wearing the necklace around her neck, and she drummed on the letters with her fingers as if they were tambourines, and when she happened to meet the priest and Sanson Carrasco, she began to dance, saying, "By my faith, we're not poor relations any more. We have a nice little governorship, and if the proudest of the gentlewomen tries to snub me now, I'll know how to put her in her place." Oh wait, that was supposed to be Teresa. Whoopsie. Pretend that it was more matronly sounding than little child sounding. "What is this, Teresa Panza? What madness is this, and what papers are those?" "The only madness is that these are letters from Duchess and governors, and these things I'm wearing around my neck are fine corals, and the Hail Marys and Our Fathers are of beaten gold, and I'm a governor's wife." "As gods in heaven, we don't understand you, Teresa, and we don't know what you're talking about." "You can see it here," responded Teresa, and she handed them the letters. The priest read them aloud so that Sanson Carrasco could hear, and Sanson and the priest looked at each other as if amazed at what they had read, and the bachelor asked who had brought the letters. Teresa responded that if they came home with her, they would see the messenger, a handsome, well-mannered boy, who had brought another present that was worth a good deal. The priest took the corals from around her neck and looked at them again, and being convinced of their value, he was amazed all over again, and said, "By the habit I wear, I don't know what to say or think about these letters and these gifts. On the one hand, I can see and touch the fineness of these corals, and on the other, I read that a duchess sends a request for 24 acorns." "It's ludicrous," said Carrasco. "Let's go and see the manager. He'll explain the things that perplex us." They did, and Teresa returned with them. They found the page sifting some barley for his horse, and Sanchica cutting slices of bacon that she could cover with eggs and give to the page, whose bearing and grace both pleased both men very much. After they had exchanged courteous greetings, Sanson asked him for news of Don Quixote as well as Sancho Panza, for although they had read the letters from Sancho and my lady the Duchess, they were still confused, and could not really grasp Sancho's governorship, especially of an insula, since all or most of the islands in the Mediterranean belonged to his majesty, to which the page remarked, "Señor, Sancho Panza is a governor. Of that there can be no doubt. Whether he governs is an insula or not does not concern me, but it's enough to know that it's a place with more than 1,000 residents. As for the acorns, I can say that my lady the Duchess is so straightforward and humble," he said, "that she not only would send a request for a peasant for some acorns, but has on occasion asked to borrow a comb from a neighbor, because I want your graces to know that the ladies of Aragon are as high-born, but not as punctilious and haughty as Castilian ladies. They are simpler in their dealings with people." While they were engaged in this conversation, Sanchica interrupted, her skirt filled with eggs, and asked the page, "Tell me, Signor, does my father happen to wear full-length breeches since he's been governor?" "I haven't noticed," responded the page, "but he probably does." "Oh, good," replied Sanchica. "How I'd like to see my father wearing them. Can you believe that since I was born I've wanted to see my father in those full-length breeches?" "Well, your grace will see him wearing those things if we live," responded the page. "By God, if his governorship lasts 2 months, he'll even be wearing a cap for cold weather." The priest and the bachelor saw clearly enough that the page was speaking sarcastically, but the fine quality of the corals and the hunting outfit that Sancho sent had the opposite effect, for Teresa had already shown them the clothing, and they could not help laughing at Sanchica's desire, especially when Teresa said, "Signor priest, keep your eyes open and see if anyone's going to Madrid or Toledo who can buy me a hooped skirt, nice and round and just the way it should be, right in fashion and the best quality, because the truth is I have to honor my husband's governorship as much as I can, and even if it's a bother, I have to go to that court and get a carriage like all the other ladies, because a woman who has a governor for husband can easily buy and keep one." "That's right, mother," said Sanchica. "Please God, it'll be today and not tomorrow, even though people who see me sitting next to my lady mother in that carriage will say, 'Just look at her, daughter of a garlic eater, sitting and leaning back in a carriage as if she were the Pope.' But they can walk in the mud, and I'll go in my carriage with my feet off the ground. A bad year and a bad month to all the gossips in the world, and as long as I'm warm, people can laugh all they want. Am I right, mother?" "Oh, daughter, you certainly are right," responded Teresa. "And all of this good fortune, and some even greater than this, my good Sancho predicted for me, and you'll see, daughter, how he doesn't stop until he makes me a countess. It's all a matter of starting to be lucky, and I've heard your good father say very often, and he loves proverbs as much as he loves you, that when they give you the calf, run over with the rope. When they give you a governorship, take it. When they give you a countship, hold on to it tight. And when they call you over with a nice present, pack it away. Or else just sleep and don't answer when fortune and good luck come knocking at your door." If you had a daughter, she'd be the daughter of a garlic eater. I mean, aren't we all garlic eaters? I love garlic. Is that just saying that they're not vampires? "And what difference does it make to me," added Sanchica, "if they say when they see me so proud and haughty, 'The dog in linen breeches,' and all the rest?" And there is a note after linen breeches, and it says, continuing the rest of the phrase. So the dog in linen breeches says, how crude, a proverb aimed at the poor who prosper and then scorn their old friends. I tolerate a bit of garlic. Hearing this, the priest said, "I can't help thinking that everyone in the Panza family was born with a sack of proverbs inside. I've never seen one of them who isn't always scattering proverbs around in every conversation they have." "That's true," said the page, "for Señor Governor Sancho says them all the time, and even though many are not to the point, they still give pleasure, and my lady the Duchess and the Lord the Duke praise them a good deal." "Then, Señor, does your grace still affirm that Sancho's governorship is true, and that there is a duchess in the world who sends his wife presents and writes to her? Because we, although we touched the presents and read the letters, don't believe it, and we think this is one of those things that concern our compatriot Don Quixote, who thinks they are all done by enchantment, and so I'm ready to say that I want to touch and feel your grace to see if you are an imagined emissary or a man of flesh and blood." My love for garlic does not explain why Dracula never accepts any of my, or does explain my gosh, does explain why Dracula never accepts any of my dinner invitations. Rude. Senores, all I know, responded the page, is that I am a true emissary, and Senor Sancho Panza is a real governor, and my master and mistress, the Duke and Duchess, can give, and have given him, the governorship. And I've heard that in it Sancho Panza is performing valiantly. Whether or not there's enchantment in this is something your graces can argue among yourselves, because I don't know any more than this, and I swear to that on the lives of my parents, who are still living, and whom I love and cherish very much. That may well be true, replied the governor, but, oh my gosh, Dubitat Augustinus, and of course, there is a note right after that, and it says, Saint Augustine places that in doubt, a phrase used by students in doctrinal controversies. No matter who doubts it, responded the page, the truth is what I have said. The truth will always rise above a lie, as oil rises above water, and if not, operibus credite et non verbis. One of your graces should come with me, and you'll see with your own eyes what your ears don't believe. And there is a note after that fun Latin, and it says a phrase quoted in chapter 25. It is based on John 10:38. Though ye believe not me, believe the works. I should be the one to go, said Sanchica. Senor, your grace can let me ride on the horse's hindquarters, because I'd be very happy to see my father. The daughters of governors should not travel the roads unescorted, but should be accompanied by coaches and litters, and a large number of servants. By God, responded Sancha, I can ride a donkey as well as a coach. You must think I'm very hard to please. Be quiet, girl, said Teresa. You don't know what you're saying, and this gentleman is right. Time changes the rhyme. When it's Sancho, it's Sancha, and when it's governor, it's Senora, and I don't know if I'm saying something or not. Senora Teresa is saying more than she thinks, said the page. Give me something to eat, and then send me away, because I plan to go back this afternoon. To which the priest said, Your grace will come and do penance with me, for Senora Teresa has more desire than provisions for serving so worthy a guest. And there is a note after do penance with me, and it says, a courteous formula for inviting someone to eat with you. I have never been asked by anyone to do penance with anybody. Ordan, it's so good to see you. Hello, hello. The page refused, but then he had to concede to his own advantage, and the priest took him home very gladly, for it meant he would have the opportunity to ask at his leisure about Don Quixote and his exploits. The bachelor offered to write replies to her letters, but Teresa did not want the bachelor involved in her affairs because she thought he was something of a trickster, and so she gave a roll and 2 eggs to an altar boy who knew how to write, and he wrote 2 letters, one for her husband and the other for the Duchess, which she herself dictated, and they are not the worst letters that appear in this great history, as we shall see further on. Ant-Man, thank you so much for the follow. Hello, welcome in. And that was the end of chapter 50. All right, so did we even spend any time with Don Quixote? I don't think we did. We found out who beat up Doña Rodriguez and Don Quixote. Of course, it was part of the Duchess's plan. And then I think we just immediately went to the page going off to see Teresa. Yeah, Teresa Panza. And he delivered the letter and he delivered the necklace and all these things. And this is a very elaborate deceit by the Duke and the Duchess to involve the whole family. I think is very weird and I don't like it. Out of curiosity, how much longer is the book? Okay, so we are on page 790 right now, and the book is 940 pages. So, less than 200 pages. And a visual representation. And it's not even all of this. There's some like appendices in the back. So we're really just reading to here. So we have this much. This is like nothing compared to the rest. We're totally finishing tonight. Sure, sure. Hey Stevie, good to see you. Yeah, so the Duke and the Duchess, I don't like them. I don't like them one bit. Like, sure, play a trick or two, but these are like super involved tricks, and I don't like them. It's not very nice. So, yeah, the page delivers the letter both from Sancho and also from the Duchess, and the barber and no, the bachelor Carrasco and the priest are just very confused. Like, how can this be? Like, it didn't actually happen. So then they go and they meet the page and they read the letters and they see the gifts and they're still a little sus, as they probably should be. Yeah, you're right. They're just bored. They're totally bored. They don't have anything to do. So why not just mess with Don Quixote and Sancho? You're right. No TV or internet. God, the worst. Okay. Star, I don't know if I answered you. There's 150 pages left. So many sips. So many sips. Yeah. Let's. They just had in-person audiobooks all the time. Maybe. I don't know. Okay. Chapter 51. Regarding the progress of Sancho Panza's governorship and other matters of comparable interest. The day following the night of the governor's patrol dawned, and for the butler it was a sleepless night, because his thoughts were filled with the face, elegance, and beauty of the maiden in disguise. The steward used what remained of the night to write to his master and mistress regarding what Sancho Panza had done and said, and he was astonished by his deeds and speech, because his words and actions indicated an extraordinary mix of intelligence and foolishness. I also feel bad for Sancho's family. They enjoy a mook stream, as meta as that would be. High demand, going from kingdom to kingdom. Finally, the governor awoke, and by order of Dr. Pedro Recio, his breakfast consisted of a small amount of preserves and 4 swallows of cold water, which Sancho would have exchanged for a piece of bread and a bunch of grapes. But seeing that this was more a matter of coercion than choice, he accepted it with a sorrowful heart and a troubled stomach, while Pedro Recio tried to persuade him that very little amounts of delicate food would enliven his wits, something that was necessary for persons occupying high positions of authority, in which one must use the strength not so much of the body as of the mind. Might have to wear a silly hat, but it would have paid well. Because of this sophistry, Sancho suffered so much hunger that he secretly cursed the governorship, and even the one who had given it to him. But with his hunger and his preserves, he began to judge that day's cases, the steward and the rest of the acolytes being present, and the first was an enigma presented to him by a stranger who said, "Signor, a very large river divided a lord's land into 2 parts, and your grace should pay close attention, because the case is important and somewhat complicated. I say then that a bridge crossed this river, and at the end of it was a gallows and a kind of tribunal hall, in which there were ordinarily 4 judges who applied the law set down by the owner of the river, the bridge, and the lands, which was as follows. If anyone crosses this bridge from one side to the other, he must first take an oath as to where he is going and why, and if he swears the truth, let him pass, and if he tells a lie, let him die by hanging on the gallows displayed there, with no chance of pardon." Knowing this law and its rigorous conditions, many people crossed the bridge, and then, when it was clear that what they swore was true, the judges let them pass freely. It so happened, then, that a man once took the oath, and he swore and said that because of the oath he was going to die on the gallows, and he swore to nothing else. The judges studied the oath and said, "If we allow this man to pass freely, he lied in his oath, and according to the law he must die. And if we hang him, he swore that he was going to die on these gallows, and having sworn the truth, according to the same law, he must go free. Senor Governor, the question for your grace is what should the judges do with the man, for they are still doubtful and undecided, and having heard of your grace's acute and elevated understanding, I have been sent to entreat your grace on their behalf to give your opinion regarding a case that is so intricate and confusing." To which Sancho responded, "Certainly those judges who sent you to me could have saved themselves the trouble, because I'm more of a dullard than a shrewd man, but even so, tell me this business again so I understand it, then maybe I'll figure it out." The questioner repeated what he had said earlier, and then Sancho said, "It seems to me I can pass judgment on this case in the blink of an eye, and it's this. The man swears he's going to die on the gallows, and if he dies there, his oath was true, and by law he deserves to be free and cross the bridge, and if they don't hang him, his oath was false, and by the same law he deserves to be hanged." "It is just as your grace says, Señor Governor," said the messenger, "and as for the completeness of your understanding, there can be no question or doubt about it." "Well then, I'll say now," replied Sancho, "that they let the part of the man that swore the truth pass freely, and hang the part that told the lie, and in this way the conditions for passing will be satisfied to the latter." "But, Señor Governor," replied the questioner, "it will be necessary for the man to be divided into 2 parts, the lying part and the truthful, and if he is divided, of necessity he will die, and then nothing that the law demands is fulfilled, and it is an express obligation that it be obeyed." "Come here, my good man," responded Sancho. "This traveler you've described, either I'm a fool, or there's as much reason for him to die as to live and cross the bridge, because just as the truth saves him, the lie condemns him. If this is so, and it is, it's my opinion that you should tell those gentlemen who sent you to me that since the reason for condemning him or sparing him are balanced perfectly, they should let him pass freely. For doing good is always more praiseworthy than doing evil, and I'd sign this with my own name, if I knew how to write. And in this case I haven't said my own idea, but a precept that came to mind, one of many that was given to me by my master, Don Quixote, the night before I came to the governor of this insula, and it was that when the law is in doubt, I should favor and embrace mercy. It was God's will that I remembered it now, since it fits this case exactly." "That's true," responded the steward, and in my opinion, Lycurgus himself, who gave laws to the Lacedaemonians, could not have made a better judgment than the one the great Panza has given, and with this let the court close for the morning, and I will give orders for the governor to have food that he likes for dinner. That's all I ask, and no tricks, said Sancho. Give me something to eat, and let cases and doubts rain down on me, and I'll take care of them in mid-air. The steward kept his word, for it seemed to him a matter of conscience not to starve to death so intelligent a governor. Besides, he intended to be finished with him that night, when he would play the final trick on him that he had been commissioned to perform. So it happened that when the governor, having eaten that day in defiance of all the rules and aphorisms of Dr. Tirteafuera, stood up from the table, a courier came in with a letter from Don Quixote. Sancho ordered the secretary to read it to him, and, if there was nothing in it that had to be kept secret, to then read it aloud. The secretary did so, and having first examined it, he said, "It can certainly be read aloud, for what Señor Don Quixote writes to your grace deserves to be inscribed and written in letters of gold, and this is what it says. Letters from Don Quixote of La Mancha to Sancho Panza, governor of the Insula Barataria. When I expected to hear news of your negligence and impertinence, Sancho, my friend, I have heard about your intelligence, for which I gave special thanks in heaven, which can raise the poor from the dung-heap, and make wise men out of fools. They tell me that you govern as if you were a man, and that you are a man as if you were an animal, so humbly do you behave. And I want you to be aware, Sancho, that many times it is proper and necessary, because of the authority of one's position, to contravene the humility of one's heart, because the admirable qualities in the person who holds high office ought to conform to the demands of the office, not the measures to which his humble state inclines him. Dress well, for a neatly decorated stick does not seem to be a stick at all. I do not say that you should wear jewels and finery, or, being a judge, that you should dress as a soldier, but only that you should wear the clothing your office requires, as long as it is clean and neat. To win the goodwill of the people you govern, you must do two things, among others. One is to be civil to everyone, although this is something I have already told you, and the other is to attempt to provide them with the necessities of life, for there is nothing that troubles the heart of the poor more than hunger and need. Do not issue many edicts, and if you do, try to make them good ones, and, above all, ones that are carried out and obeyed, for edicts that are not carried out are as good as non-existent, and they let it be known that the prince who had the intelligence and authority to issue them did not have the courage to enforce them. Laws that intimidate but are not enforced become like the log that was the king of the frogs. At first it frightened them, but then in time it came to despise it, and climbed up on it. Be a father to virtues and a stepfather to vices. Do not always be severe, or always mild, but choose the middle way between those two extremes. This is the object of wisdom. Visit the prisons, the slaughterhouses, and the market squares, for the presence of the governor in these places is of great importance. It consoles the prisoners, who can hope for a quick release. It frightens the butchers, who then make their weights honest. It terrifies the market women, and for the same reason. Do not show yourself to be, even if you are, which I do not believe, a greedy man, a womanizer, or a glutton, because if the people who and those who deal with you learn your specific inclination, that is where they will attack until they throw you down to the depths of perdition. Look at and examine, consider and review the advice and precepts I gave to you in writing before you left here for your governorship, and you will see that you can find in them, if you follow them, something to help you bear the trials and difficulties that governors constantly encounter. Write to your lord and lady, and show them that you are grateful, for ingratitude is the daughter of pride and one of the greatest sins we know, while the person who is grateful to those who have granted him benefits indicates that he will also be grateful to God, who has granted and continues to grant him so many. My lady, the Duchess, dispatched a message with your hunting outfit and another present to your wife, Teresa Panza. We expect a reply at any moment. I have been somewhat indisposed by a certain clawing that happened at the expense of my nose, but it was nothing, for if there are enchanters who mistreat me, there are also those who defend me. Tell me if the steward who is with you had anything to do with the actions of Countess Trifaldi, as you suspected, and also tell me about everything that happens to you, for the distance is not very great. Further, I intend to leave this life of leisure very soon, for I was not born to be idle. A matter has been presented to me that I believe will discredit me with the Duke and Duchess, but although it concerns me a great deal, at the same time it does not concern me at all, for, in the end, I must comply with my profession rather than with their desires. As the saying goes, amicus Plato, sed Magnus, amica veritas. There's a note after that saying, and it says, be a friend to Plato, but be a better friend to the truth. I say this to you in Latin because I assume you must have learned it after you became a governor. May God be with you so that no one need feel sorry for you. Your friend, Don Quixote of La Mancha. I like how he assumes that Sancho just now knows Latin. Or at least that phrase. Super interesting. Sancho listened very attentively to the letter, and it was considered and held to be very wise by all who heard it. Then Sancho got up from the table, called the secretary, went with him to his room, and without further delay wished to respond immediately to his master Don Quixote. And he told the secretary that without adding or taking away anything, he was to write down what he dictated, and the secretary did. The letter of reply said the following. Letter from Sancho Panza to Don Quixote of La Mancha. I've been so busy with my affairs that I don't have time to scratch my head or even cut my nails, and so I'm wearing them too long. God help me. I say this, dear master of my soul, so that your grace won't be surprised that I haven't told you anything until now about whether I'm faring well or badly in this governorship, where I'm hungrier than when the two of us were wandering through the forests and the wild places. My lord, the Duke, wrote to me the other day, saying that certain spies had entered the insula to kill me, and so far I haven't discovered any except for a certain doctor who is in the place on salary to kill all the governors who come here. His name is Dr. Pedro Recio, and he comes from Tirterfuera. And now your grace can see what a name he has, and whether or not I should be afraid of dying at his hands. And this doctor says about himself that he doesn't cure diseases when they've arrived, but prevents them so they won't come. And the medicines he uses are diet and more diet until the person's nothing but skin and bones, as if being skinny weren't a worse ailment than having a fever. In short, he's starving me to death. And I'm dying of despair because I thought I'd come to this governorship and have hot food and cold drinks and please my body with linen sheets and feather beds, but I've come to do penance, like a hermit, and since I'm not doing it willingly, I think the devil will take me in the end. So far, I haven't touched a fee or taken a bribe, and I can't think what it means because they've told me here that people give or lend a good deal of money to the governors who usually come to this insula, even before they arrive, and that this is common practice for anybody who takes a governorship. Not only this one. Last night when I was on patrol, I came across a very beautiful maiden in a man's clothes, and her brother who was dressed as a woman. My butler fell in love with the girl and chose her in his mind to be his wife, according to what he has told me, and I chose the boy to be my son-in-law. Today we'll put our thoughts into practice with their father, whose name is Diego de la Llana, a gentleman and as old a Christian as you could wish. I visit the market squares, as your grace advises, and yesterday I found a market woman who was selling fresh hazelnuts, and I saw that she had mixed a fanega of fresh hazelnuts with a fanega of ones that are old, worthless, and rotten. I took them all for the boys in catechism class, who will know very well how to tell them apart, and I ordered her not to come to the market square for 2 weeks. There is a note after fanega, and it says, a dry measure, roughly equivalent to 1.6 bushels in Spain. People told me it was a good thing to do. What I can tell your grace is that in this village, they say there are no people worse than market women because they're all shameless, hard-hearted, and bold. And I believe it because I've seen them in other villages. I'm very happy that my lady, the Duchess, has written to Teresa Panza, my wife, and sent her the presents your grace has mentioned, and I'll try to show my gratitude at the right time. Your grace should kiss her hands on my behalf, saying that I say she hasn't thrown anything into a torn sack, as my actions will prove. I wouldn't want your grace to have any unpleasant disputes with my lord and my lady, because if your grace argues with them, it will obviously harm me, and it wouldn't be right if, after you advised me to show me gratitude, your grace doesn't show it to those who have granted you so many favors and treated you so well in their castle. I don't understand what you said about clawing, but I imagine it must be one of those evil villainies that wicked enchanters usually do to you. I'll find out when we see each other. I'd like to send your grace something, but I don't know what to send, except some very curious tubing for syringes that they make on this insula to be used with bladders. Though, if my position lasts, I'll find something to send to you, one way or another. If my wife, Teresa Panza, writes to me, would your grace please pay the cost and send me the letter? For I long to know the condition of my house, my wife, and my children. And with this, may God free your grace from the evil intentions of enchanters, and take me from this governorship safe and sound, which I doubt, because according to how Dr. Pedro Recio treats me, I don't think I'll get away with more than my life. Your grace's servant, Sancho Panza, the governor. The secretary sealed the letter and dispatched the courier immediately. And then the men who were deceiving Sancho met and decided how to dispatch him from the governorship. Sancho spent the afternoon issuing some ordinances concerning the good government of what he imagined to be an insula, and he ordered that there were to be no speculators in provisions in the nation, and that wine could be imported from anywhere, as long as its place of origin was indicated, so that it could be priced according to its value, quality, and reputation, and whoever watered it or changed its name would lose his life. That's harsh. He lowered the price of all footwear, especially shoes, because it seemed to him they were sold at an exorbitant price. He put a cap on the salaries of servants, which were galloping unchecked along the road of greed. He imposed very serious penalties on those who sang lewd and lascivious songs, either by night or by day. He ordered that no blind man could sing verses about miracles unless he carried authentic testimonies to their truth, because it seemed to him that most of the ones blind men sang about were false, bringing those that were true into disrepute. He created and appointed a bailiff for the poor, not to prosecute them, but to examine them to see if they really were poor, because in the shadow of feigned cripples and false wounds come the strong arms of thieves and very healthy drunkards. In short, he ordained things so good that to this day they are obeyed in that village and are called the Constitution of the great governor, Sancho Panza. And that is the end of chapter 51. So that's hilarious that Sancho is actually a really good, capable, and competent governor. And that the people who have been paid by the Duke and Duchess to sort of go along with this ruse, who are supposed to be like sending Sancho into like all of this like chaos, thinking that it would be too overwhelming, are like, well, gosh, he's able to do all of these things. We need to figure out how to get him out. All the way in 2023. You think the green hair would suffice? Would be pretty different back then. Yeah. Yeah, I'd probably be burned for having green hair. But yeah, I love that Sancho is like actually like he's really stepped up, which is wild. I mean, he hasn't really had a chance to step up being a squire and just like sort of hidden behind Don Quixote. And we got a glimpse, a very small glimpse, when he went back home and was talking to Teresa and the like authority that he talked with. And while it didn't quite match up with like how he talks, because there was like, first of all, no proverbs, but the like decisions that he made and the I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The authority that he had was very different than when he is like the squire and just following Don Quixote. Who knew that Brewster's Millions was actually a retelling of Sancho's story? The more you know. So yeah, I love that he is thriving and that they're just trying to figure out how to get him out now. And I love that his complaint is just that he's hungry all the time because the doctor like won't let him eat things because they aren't good for his health. And Sancho's like, just give me some bread, please, bread and grapes, please, that's all I want. And the doctor is like, no, you're gonna have 3 sips of cold water and this weird stew. I don't even remember what it was called. And that's great. You may be accused of being witch, which is fun until it isn't. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. Chapter 52, which recounts the adventure of the second Dolores, or anguished, dueña, also called Doña Rodriguez. Cid Hamate recounts that when Don Quixote's claw marks had healed, it seemed to him that the life he was leading in the castle contradicted the entire order of chivalry that he professed, and so he resolved to ask the permission of the Duke and Duchess to leave for Zaragoza, whose tourney was fast approaching. There he intended to win the armor that is awarded at the festival. One day, when he was sitting at a table with the Duke and Duchess, and beginning to put his intention into effect and to ask for their permission, suddenly there came through the door of a great room 2 women, as they subsequently proved to be, covered in mourning from head to toe, and one of them came up to Don Quixote and threw herself flat on the floor before him, her mouth pressed to his feet, and lamenting with such sad, deep, and dolorous moans that everyone who heard and saw her was thrown into confusion. Although the Duke and Duchess thought it was probably a trick their servants wanted to play on Don Quixote, still, when they saw how earnestly the woman sighed, moaned, and wept, they were uncertain and in suspense until Don Quixote, filled with compassion, lifted her from the floor and asked her to disclose her identity by removing the veil that hid her weeping face. She did so, and showed herself to be the last person anyone expected, because she revealed the countenance of the dueña, Doña Rodriguez, and the other woman in mourning was her daughter, who had been deceived by the rich farmer's son. All those who knew the dueña were astounded, the Duke and Duchess more than anyone, for although they thought her a harmless fool, they did not think she would go so far as to commit acts of madness. Finally, Doña Rodriguez turned to her master and mistress and said, "May it please your excellencies to give me permission to converse with this knight for a moment, that being necessary to the success of a matter in which I have become involved because of the audacity of an ill-intentioned villain." The Duke said that he gave it, and that she must converse, with Señor Don Quixote for as long as she wished. She, directing her voice and turning her face toward Don Quixote, said, "Some days ago, O valiant knight, I recounted to you the injustice and treachery committed by a wicked farmer against my dearly loved daughter, this unfortunate woman here present, and you promised to defend her, righting the wrong that had been done to her. And now it has come to my attention that you wish to leave this castle, to wander in search of good fortune, and may God grant that to you. But before you slip away down those roads, I would like to challenge this uncouth rustic and force him to marry my daughter and fulfill the promise he made to her to be her husband before and prior to his lying with her, because to think that my lord the Duke will execute justice is to ask the elm tree for pears, for the reason I have already mentioned to your grace in private. And so, may our Lord grant your peace, your grace, very good health, and may he not forsake us." Don Quixote responded to these words with great solemnity and gravity, saying, "Good duenna, moderate your tears, or I should say dry them, and hold back your sighs, for I take it as my responsibility to assist your daughter, who should not have been so ready to believe lovers' promises, which are simple to make and very difficult to keep. And so, with the permission of my lord the Duke, I should leave immediately to look for the heartless young man, and I shall find him, and challenge him, and kill him if when he refuses to keep the promise he made, for the principal intention of my profession is to forgive the humble and punish the proud. I mean to say, to assist the unfortunate and destroy the cruel." "There is no need," responded the Duke, "for your grace to take the trouble to look for the rustic about whom this good duenna is complaining, nor is there any need for your grace to ask my permission to challenge him, for I consider him already challenged, and take responsibility for informing him of this challenge, and telling him to accept it, and come to my castle to answer it for himself, and I shall give both of you a reliable field, satisfying all the conditions that generally ought to be satisfied in such actions, and satisfying the demands of justice for each of you, which is the obligation of all princes who provide in unencumbered field to those who do battle within the borders of their domains." "Then with this assurance and the kind profession of your highness," replied Don Quixote, "I say here that for this occasion I renounce my status as gentleman, and I lower myself to the level of the miscreant's base birth, and make myself his equal, thereby allowing him to do combat with me, and so, although he is absent, I challenge and defy him because of the wrong he committed in defrauding this poor woman, who was a maiden, and no longer is, the fault being his, and he must fulfill the promise he made to her to be her legitimate husband, or die in the contest." Who would have thought that Don Quixote was the one who started the phrase base? That's what I'm taking away from this. And then, removing a glove, he threw it into the middle of the room, and the Duke picked it up, saying, as he had said before, that he accepted the challenge in the name of his vassal, and set the time for their encounter as 6 days hence, in the field, the courtyard of the castle, and the weapons, those customarily used by knights, lance and shield and articulated armor, and all the other accoutrements, within deceit, fraud, or trickery of any kind, for they would be seen and examined by the judges in the field. But before anything else, it is necessary for this excellent duenna and this imperfect maiden to put their right to justice in the hands of Señor Don Quixote, for otherwise nothing will be accomplished, and the challenge will not be carried out as it should. "I do," responded the duenna. "And so do I," added the daughter, tearful, ashamed, and bad-tempered. Then, having made this arrangement, and the Duke having decided what needed to be done, the women in mourning left, and the Duchess ordered that from then on they were to be treated not as her servants, but as enterprising ladies who had come to her house to ask for justice. And so they were given a private room, and served as if they were strangers, not without consternation among the other serving women, who did not know where the foolishness and audacity of Dona Rodriguez and her unfortunate daughter would end. Oh my gosh. Welcome in. Hello. Thank you so much for the first time chat. Hi. Good to see you. Croco, hello. At this point, to give a final touch of joy to the festivities and bring the meal to a successful conclusion, into the room came the page who had carried the letters and presents to Teresa Panza, wife of the governor, Sancho Panza, and his arrival made the Duke and Duchess very happy, for they were longing to know what had happened to him on this journey when they asked him. The page responded that he could not tell them publicly, or in only a few words, and if it pleased their excellencies, that should wait until they were alone, and in the meantime they could enjoy the letters. And he took out 2 letters and placed them in the hands of the Duchess. One of them said in the address, "Letter for my lady, the Duchess so-and-so of I don't know where," and the other said, "To my husband, Sancho Panza, governor of the insula of Barataria. God keep him more years than me." The Duchess could not wait for her bread to bake, as the saying goes, until she had read her letter, and she opened it and read it to herself, and saying that she could read it aloud so that the Duke and the others present could hear it, she read as follows. Oh, you've excellent, excellent. Also, hello, hello. I'm so glad to see that you're here from Greece. Amazing, amazing. Oh, thank you. Falcor, you make me blush. She read as follows. Letter from Teresa Panza to the Duchess. Signora, the letter your Highness wrote to me made me very happy, for the truth is it was something I had been wanting. The string of corals is very nice, and my husband's hunting outfit is just as good. Your ladyship making my spouse Sancho a governor has given a lot of pleasure to the whole village, even if nobody believes it, especially the priest, and Master Nicholas, the barber, and Sanson Carrasco, the bachelor. But that doesn't bother me, as long as it's true, which it is. Each person can say whatever he wants, though to tell you the truth, if the corals and the outfit hadn't come, I wouldn't believe it either, because in this village everybody takes my husband for a fool, and except for governing a herd of goats, they can't imagine what governorship he'd be good for. May God make him good and show him how to see his children's need. You are the first and only Greek ASMR channel. Amazing. That's so fun. Oh no, not at all. That you're totally fine. The ASMR community is amazing. Yeah, yeah, and it does go across languages. It's so great. Senora of my soul, I've decided, with your grace's permission, to put this good day in my house by going to court and leaning back in a carriage and making their eyes pop, for there are thousands who are envious of me, and so I beg your excellency to tell my husband and send me some money, and to make it enough, because at court expenses are high. Bread sells for a real, and a pound of meat costs 30 maravedis, which is a judgment. And if he doesn't want me to go, he should let me know soon, because my feet are itching to get started. My friends and neighbors tell me that if my daughter and I look grand and important in court, my husband will be known through me and not me through him, because many people are bound to ask, "Who are those ladies in the carriage?" And a servant of mine will respond, "The wife and daughter of Sancho Panza, governor of the insula of Barataria." And in this way Sancho will become known, and I'll be admired. So let's get to it, no matter what. And there are 2 notes. The first one, I have to find because it was a while ago. Here we go. To put this good day in my house, it says the phrase is based on a proverb. When you have a good day, put it in the house, which is roughly equivalent to make hay while the sun shines. And then the other one is der bread sells for a real and a pound of meat costs 30 maravedis, which is a judgment. And it says a phrase that alludes to the final judgment, suggesting punishment for sin. In English, we would say figuratively that something we disapprove of is a sin or a crime. It makes me as sorry as I can be that this year they haven't picked acorns in this village. Even so, I'm sending your highness about half a salamine. I went to the woods myself to pick them, and pick them over one by one, and I couldn't find acorns any bigger. I wish they were like ostrich eggs. Your magnificence mustn't forget to write to me, and I'll be sure to answer and tell you about my health and everything there is to tell about in this village, where I'm praying that our Lord keeps your highness, and doesn't forget about me. My daughter, Sancha, and my son kiss the hands of your grace, wishing to see your ladyship more than to write to you. I am your servant, Teresa Panza. Everyone derived great pleasure from hearing Teresa Panza's letter, especially the Duke and Duchess, and the Duchess asked Don Quixote if he thought it would be all right to open the letter that had come for the governor, for she imagined it to be very fine. Don Quixote said he would open it in order to give him them pleasure, and he did so, and saw that it said as follows. Letter from Teresa Panza to her husband, Sancho Panza. I received your letter, Sancho, of my soul, and I can tell you and swear to you as a Catholic Christian that I practically went crazy with happiness. Just think, my husband. When I heard that you were a governor, I thought I'd fall down dead from sheer joy, because people say that sudden joy can kill just like great sorrow. Your daughter, Sanchica, wet herself without realizing it. She was so happy. I don't think she did. I think she just made that up. I had the outfit you sent us in front of me, and the corals my lady the Duchess sent around my neck, and both letters in my hands, and the man who brought them here. And even so I believed and thought that what I saw and touched was a dream, because who could ever imagine that a goatherd would become a governor of insulas? And dear husband, my mother used to say, you had to live a lot to see a lot. I say this because I plan to see more if I live more, because I don't plan to stop until I see you as a landlord or a tax collector, for these are trades, after all, in which you always have and handle money, though the devil carries off anyone who misuses them. My lady the Duchess will tell you how much I want to go to court. Think about it, and let me know if you like the idea, and I'll try to honor you by riding there in a carriage. Truly a horror, and she's 14. The daughter is 14, and she's just like, your daughter wet herself. She was really excited, and I just imagine Sanchika being like, Mom, Mom, don't embarrass me. No, I didn't. The priest, the barber, the bachelor, and even the sacristan can't believe you're a governor. They say it's all a fraud, or a question of enchantment, like everything that has to do with your master Don Quixote. Sanson says he'll go to look for you and get the governorship out of your head, and Don Quixote's craziness out of his skull. I don't do anything but laugh and look at my necklace, and plan the dress I'll make for your daughter out of your outfit. I sent some acorns to my lady the Duchess. I wish they were made of gold. Send me some pearl necklaces. If they wear them, I'll lend Insula. The news from the village is that Burreca married her daughter to a painter without any talent who came here to paint, whatever it turned out to be. The council told him to paint His Majesty's coat of arms over the doors of the town hall. He asked for 2 ducados. They paid him in advance. He worked for a week. At the end of that time he hadn't painted anything, and he said he couldn't paint trifles. He gave back the money, And even so, he got married, claiming to be a skilled workman. The truth is, he's put down the brush and picked up a hoe and goes to the field like a gentleman. Pedro de Lobos' son has taken orders and has a tonsure and intends to become a priest. Minguia, Mingo, Silvato's granddaughter, found out and has made a complaint against him, saying he promised to marry her. Gossips are saying she's pregnant by him, but he absolutely denies it. There are no olives this year, and there's not a drop of vinegar to be found anywhere in the village. A company of soldiers came through here and took 3 village girls away with them. I don't want to tell you who they are. Maybe they'll come back. And there's bound to be somebody who will marry them, with their good and bad qualities. Sanchica is making lace trimmings. She earns 8 maravedis a day, free and clear, and she's putting them in a money box to help with her dowry. But now that she's the daughter of governor, you'll give her a dowry, and she won't have to work for it. The mountain in the square dried up. Nope, the fountain in the square dried up. Lightning hit the pillory, which doesn't bother me at all. I'm waiting for your answer to this letter, and a decision about my going to court. And with this, may God grant you more years than he does me, or as many, because I wouldn't want to leave you without me in this world. Your wife, Teresa Panza. The letters were celebrated, laughed at, approved, and admired. As a final touch, the courier arrived with the letter Sancho had sent to Don Quixote, which was also read publicly, casting doubt on the foolishness of the governor. The Duchess withdrew in order to learn from the page what had occurred in Sancho's village, which he recounted to her in great detail, not failing to relate every circumstance. He gave her the acorns, as well as the cheese that Teresa had given him, because it was very good, even better than the ones from Tronchon. There's a note right after Tronchon, and it says, a village in the present-day province of Teruel. The Duchess received it with the greatest pleasure, and with that we shall leave her in order to recount the end of the governorship of the great Sancho Panza, the flower and model of all insular governors. And that is the end of chapter 52. Okay, so we go back to Don Quixote, and we get an actual plea from Doña Rodriguez. I think that's what it is. I think I'm interpreting it correctly, that this is not part of the Duke and Duchess's, like, fantasies or claims or deceits or anything like that. And she makes a claim, like a plea to help her daughter because she has heard that he is leaving, and how can he leave when she has already said all of these horrible things and she just really needs help. And so it is, the Duke is arranging a fight, a discussion, I'm not quite sure, 6 days from now, and Don Quixote is going to go there in like the middle of a field or something like that. And then the courier arrives with Teresa Panza's letters, one to the Duchess and one to Sancho, and for some reason they open Sancho's letter, and I don't understand why. That's not for you. What if there was private things, like their daughter wetting herself? Now everybody in that room knows. Embarrassing. Yeah. And that's where we are. And so now the next chapter is going back to Sancho. We'll see. We'll see how it is. Yep. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Chapter 53. Regarding the troubled end and conclusion of the governorship of Sancho Panza. so short-lived. To believe that the things of this life will endure forever, unchanged, is to believe the impossible. It seems instead that everything goes around. I mean, around in a circle. Spring pursues summer. Summer pursues estío. Estío pursues autumn. Autumn pursues winter. And winter pursues spring. And in this way, time turns around a continuous wheel. Only human life races to its end more quickly than time, with no hope for renewal except in the next life, which has no boundaries that limit it. And there is a note after estío, and it says, currently a literary term for summer, verano. When the year was divided into 3 seasons, estío was the season that began at the vernal equinox and ended at the autumnal equinox. Yeah. Isn't that wild? That's pretty cool. It is always interesting hearing how, or like learning how, like time is different. Like measuring time has changed. It's just really cool. I don't know. I don't know. It's just nerdy, and I love it. So, says Sid Hamate, a Muslim philosopher, because in the understanding of the fleeting impermanence of our present life and the everlasting nature of the eternal life that awaits us, has been grasped by many without the enlightenment of faith, but with only the light of their natural intelligence. But here our author says this because of the speed with which the governorship of Sancho ended, evaporated, dissolved, and disappeared in shadow, and spoke. Sancho was in bed on the 7th night of the day of his governorship, not full of bread or wine, but of judging and giving opinions and issuing statutes and decrees, when sleep, notwithstanding and despite his hunger, began to close his eyes. And he heard such a great noise of bells ringing and voices shouting that it seemed as if the entire insula were being destroyed. He sat up in bed, listening attentively to see if he could learn what the cause might be of so much tumult. Not only did he fail, but the sound of infinite trumpets and drums was added to the clamor of shouts and bells, leaving him more confused and more full of fear and consternation. Getting out of bed, he put on slippers because the floor was damp, and not bothering with a robe or anything resembling one, he went to the door of his room just in time to see more than 20 persons coming along the corridors, carrying burning torches and holding unsheathed swords in their hands, all of them shouting in loud voices, "To arms! To arms, Señor Governor! To arms! Infinite enemies have entered the insula, and we are lost if your ingenuity and valor do not come to our aid." Clamorous, frenzied, and in an uproar, they approached the place where Sancho was standing, astonished and stupefied at what he was hearing and seeing, and when they had reached him, one of them said, "Arm yourself immediately, your lordship, or else you will be lost along with the entire insula." "What do I have to do with arming?" responded Sancho. "And what do I do about arms or coming to anybody's aid? These things are better left to my master, Don Quixote, who in the wink of an eye would dispatch and see to them. But I, sinner that I am, I don't know anything about this kind of battle." "Ah, Señor Governor," said another, "what reluctance is this? Arm yourself, your grace, for we bring you both offensive and defensive weapons, and go out to the square, and be our guide and our captain, for by right that is your duty, being our governor." "Then arm me, and may it be for the best," replied Sancho. And they immediately brought 2 full-length shields that they had been carrying, and placed them over his nightshirt, not allowing him to put on any other clothing, one shield in front and the other behind, and they pulled his arms through some place they had made, and tied the shields on very carefully with cords, leaving him walled in and boarded up as straight as a spindle, and unable to bend his knees or take a single step. In his hands they placed a lance, which he leaned on in order to keep his balance. When they had him in this state, they told him to walk and lead them, and encourage them all, for with him as their pole star, their lighthouse, and their lamp, their affairs would have a happy conclusion. "Wretch that I am, how can I walk," responded Sancho, "when I can't move my kneecaps because of these boards sewed up so tight against my body? What you'll have to do is carry me in your arms and lay me down, or stand me up at some postern gate, and I'll guard it either with this lance or with my body." Can you imagine that? Sancho is just all like wrapped up in armor and he can't move, and he's like, you know what? Just carry me. Just carry me, put me in like a corner somewhere, just post me somewhere, and I'll just defend from there. That's how it works, right? "Go on, Señor Governor," said another man. "It's fear more than boards that keeps you from walking. Put an end to this, and start to move, for it's late. Our enemies are increasing, their shouts are becoming louder, and the danger is growing." Their persuasion and insults prodded the poor governor into moving, and he fell to the ground with such force that he thought he had broken into pieces. He lay there, like a giant turtle enclosed and covered by its shells, or like half a side of bacon held between two salting boards, or even like a boat lying upside down in the sand. But not even when they saw that he had fallen did those mockers have any compassion for him. Instead, they put out their torches and shouted even louder, repeating the call to arms with such urgency, and running over poor Sancho, and stamping so hard on the shields that if he had not retreated and pulled back, drawing his head inside the shields, things would have gone very badly for the poor governor who, enclosed in that narrow space, sweated and perspired, and with all his heart commended himself to God, praying that he deliver him from that danger. So some stumbled over him, others fell, and one even stood on top of him for a long while, and from there, as if from a watchtower, he commanded the armies, and shouted in a loud voice, saying, "Some men here! The enemy is pressing hard over there! Guard that opening! Close that gate! Down with those ladders! Bring the pitch pots, the tar, the resin, and resin in cauldrons of burning oil! Barricade the streets with mattresses!" And there is a note. Little bro, like, hello, thank you so much for the follow. Yeah, dude, why do you gotta be like that? Bye, little bro. Sorry, not that stream. Man, okay. And we have a note. There is a note after pitch pots, and it says, "Blazing pots filled with pitch and other flammable material, which were thrown at the enemy." In short, he named with great zeal all the implements and instruments and tools of war used to prevent an attack on a city, and the battered Sancho, who heard and suffered it all, said to himself, "Oh, if only our Lord would put an end to the loss of this insula, and I would find myself dead or free of this affliction." Heaven heard his prayer, and when he least expected it, he heard voices shouting, "Victory! Victory! The enemy is retreating! Oh, Señor Governor, your grace should get up and come enjoy the conquest and divide the spoils taken from the enemy by the valor of that invincible arm." "Pick me up," the dolorous Sancho said in a doleful voice. Zappy, hello, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. They helped him to his feet, and when he was standing, he said, The enemy that I've conquered I want you to nail to my forehead. I don't want to divide the enemy's spoils, but I beg and implore some friend, if I have any, to give me a drink of wine and wipe away and dry the sweat, because I'm turning into water. And there is a note after nail to my forehead, and it says, this indicates that what has just been said is either impossible or untrue. Hello, so good to see you. They dried him, brought him wine, and untied the shields, and he sat on his bed and fainted from fear, shock, and alarm. Those who had deceived him regretted having carried the joke so far, but Sancho's return to consciousness tempered the regret caused by his swoon. He asked the time. They responded that dawn had broken. He fell silent, and without saying another word he began to dress, deep in silence. And everyone watched him, waiting to see what the outcome would be of his dressing so urgently. Finally he was dressed, and very slowly, because he was bruised and could not move quickly, he went to the stable, followed by everyone present. And when he reached the gray, he embraced him, and gave him a kiss of peace on the forehead, and not without tears in his eyes, he said, "Come here, my companion and friend, comrade in all my sufferings and woes. When I spent time with you and had no other thoughts but mending your harness and feeding your body, then my hours, my days, and my years were happy. But after I left you and climbed the towers of ambition and pride, 1,000 miseries, 1,000 troubles, and 4,000 worries have entered deep into my soul." Hey, Sabi, I am not amazing at Spanish. I'm so sorry. Yes, it is. Oh, you're from Spain. Amazing. Welcome in. So good to see you. As he was saying these words, he was also saddling his donkey, and no one said anything to him. And when the donkey was saddled, with great sadness and sorrow, he mounted him, and directing his words and thoughts to the steward, the secretary, the butler, the physician, Pedro Recio, and the many others who were present, he said, "Make way, senores, and let me return to my old liberty. Let me go and find my past life, so that I can come back from this present death. I was not born to be a governor, or to defend insulas or cities from enemies who want to attack them. I have a better understanding of plowing and digging, of pruning and layering the vines, than of making laws or defending provinces and kingdoms. St. Peter's fine in Rome. I mean, each man is fine doing the work he was born for. I'm better off with a scythe in my hand than a governor's scepter. I'd rather eat my fill of gazpacho than suffer the misery of a brazen doctor who starves me to death. And I'd rather lie down in the shade of an oak tree in summer and wrap myself in an old, bald sheepskin in winter, in freedom, than lie between linen sheets and wear sables, subject to a governorship. God keep your graces, and tell my lord the duke that I was born naked, and I'm naked now. I haven't lost or gained a thing. I mean, I came into this governorship without a blanca, and I'm leaving without one, which is very different from how the governors of other insulas leave. Now move aside and let me go. I'll apply some poultices because I think all my ribs are crushed, thanks to the enemies who ran me over." Everybody knows Cervantes. "It must not be like this, Señor Governor," said Dr. Recio, "for I shall give your grace a potion against falls and bruising, which will return you to your former well-being and vigor. As for food, I promise your grace to mend my ways and allow you to eat as much as you want, for anything you like." Oh, did I? Oh, I might have. Oh no. Type your message in again. Or I can scroll back in just a minute. The chapter's almost over. "You peeped too late," responded Sancho. "I'd sooner become a Turk than not leave. These aren't tricks you can play twice. By God, I'm as likely to stay here or accept another governorship, even if they handed it to me on a platter, as I am to fly up to heaven without wings." There's a note after peeped too late, and it says, in allusion to the story of a man who sucked on an egg, and when the chick peeped in his throat, he said, You peeped too late. Wild. That's such a wild story. I'm from the lineage of the Panzas, and they're all stubborn. And if they say odds once, odds it'll be, even if it's evens, no matter what anybody says. Here in the stable, I'll leave the wings on the ant that carried me into the air where the martins and other birds could eat me, and I'll go back to walking on my feet on level ground. And if they're not adorned with cut-out shoes on Cordoban leather, they won't lack for sandals made of hemp. There is a note after cut-out shoes, and it says, shoes worn by the nobility were often decorated with holes and cutouts. It is a terrible story. You peep too late. I'm gonna start saying that to people. Every sheep with its mate, and let no man stretch his legs farther than the length of the sheet. And now let me pass. It's getting late. To which the steward said, Senor Governor, we would very gladly let your grace pass, though it saddens us greatly to lose you, for your wit and Christian behavior oblige us to want to keep you. But as everyone knows, every governor is obliged, before he abandons the place he had governed, to give an accounting of your governorship. Your grace, give us one of the 10 days in which you have held the governorship, and then go, and God's peace go with you. No one can ask that of me, responded Sancho, unless he is ordered to by my lord and duke. I'm going to see him, and I'll give an exact accounting to him. Besides, leaving naked, as I am, no other proof is necessary to show that I governed like an angel. By God, the great Sancho is correct, said Dr. Recio, and I am of the opinion that we should let him leave, because the duke will surely be overjoyed to see him. They all agreed and allowed him to go, first offering to accompany him and to give him everything he might want for the gratification of his person and the comfort of his journey. Sancho said he wanted no more than a little barley for his donkey, and half a cheese and half a loaf of bread for himself. Since the way was so short, there was no need for more or better provisions. Everyone embraced him, and he, weeping, embraced all of them, and he left them marveling, not only at his words, but at his decision, which was so resolute and intelligent. And that is the end of chapter 53. Okay, so I kind of love Sancho as the governor. Like, super confident, really stepped up for it, and like he knew when to stop. He's like, you know what? This really isn't for me. Yes, he was pushed out. Absolutely, he was pushed out. But like even the people who were pushing him out, like felt bad about it. Like the laws and the things that he instituted were still being used like today. It's just so wild. It's so wild. Okay, I scrolled up. Let's see. I should read the Odyssey and Iliad. Oh man, one book right after the other. Millions of pages. Just forever reading insanely long stories. I have not read either one of those, and it is scary to me, which maybe that means I probably should read it, you know? So yeah, I kind of really liked Sancho as governor. Sancho as governor. I'm gonna make a t-shirt that says vote for Sancho. You haven't read the Iliad yet, but you know the Odyssey very well. Okay. Good, I'm assuming. It's just one of those books that's just like overwhelming. You know what I mean? Sancho 2023, exactly. The more we talk about it, the more my brain is like, yeah, totally, this is definitely a good idea, and this may or may not happen. So, you've heard it here, folks. Moog votes Sancho. We shall see. All right. We are on. Oh, we're totally good for time. Merch. I know. Moog merch. So many ideas. Sancho 2023. I'll be the campaign manager. No, I really shouldn't be the campaign manager. Sancho could be his own campaign manager and do amazing. I know definitely not half as many proverbs as he does. Takes out vote for Pedro. Just cross off Pedro and write Sancho. I see nothing wrong with that. Or you could like try and make Pedro look like Panza. Odyssey. Oh, you can interpret it too. Odyssey has symbolism and philosophical ideals inside of it. Not all of it, but it's an amazing book, and you strongly suggest it. Okay, cool. All right, all right. We'll get there. Okay. Chapter 54. Oh my gosh. Bench Lucas, hello. Thank you so much for the follow. I was about to sneeze. I wasn't like making obscene hand gestures. Hello. Thank you so much. Welcome in. Chapter 54. Okay, no sneeze. Which deals with matters related to his history and to no other. And Don Napoleon Dynamite, exactly. The Duke and Duchess resolved that Don Quixote's challenge to their vassal for the reason already recounted should go forward, and since the young man was in Flanders, where he had fled so as not to have Dona Rodriguez for a mother-in-law, they ordered a Gascon footman named Tosselos to appear in his place, first instructing him very carefully in everything he had to do. 2 days later, the Duke told Don Quixote that in 4 days his opponent would come to present himself in the field, armed as a knight, to maintain that the maiden was lying through some, if not all, of her teeth, if she affirmed he had given her a promise of marriage. And there is a note here. And it is after through her teeth, and it says the equivalent phrases in Spanish, mentir por mitad de la barba and mentir por todo la barba, to lie through half of one's beard and to lie through one's whole beard, mean essentially the same thing. Unfortunately, the contrast between half and whole makes a little sense in English. That's the interesting part in translating like sayings and phrases that don't quite make it. Like lying through one's teeth is definitely a saying in English, but lying through half of your teeth is not quite the same. These little footnotes are just, they're so good. They're so golden. All right. Don Quixote was very happy to hear the news, and he promised himself to perform miracles in this matter, and he considered it very fortunate that an opportunity had presented itself that would allow the Duke and Duchess to see the extent of the valor of his mighty arm, and so, with joy and delight, he waited for the 4 days to pass, although, if reckoned by his desire, they had become 400 centuries. Let us allow them to pass, as we have allowed other things to pass, and accompany Sancho, who was both happy and sad as he came riding on the gray to find his master, whose companionship pleased him more than being governor of all the insulas in the world. And I love the meta-ness, almost, the like fourth wall break. That's like, all right, well, while we're waiting for these 4 days, let's do the thing that we always do and let's just go to our other main character. That's great. He had not gone very far from the insula of his governorship. He had never bothered to find out if it was an island, city, town, or village that he was governing, when he saw coming toward him along the road 6 pilgrims with their staffs, the kind of foreign pilgrims who beg for alms by singing, and as they approached him they arranged themselves in a row, lifted their voices, and began to sing in their own language, which Sancho could not understand, except for the one word alms, which was clearly pronounced. And then he understood that in their song they were asking for alms, which he, as Cid Hamate says, was excessively charitable. He took from his saddlebags his provisions of half a loaf of bread and cheese, and half a cheese, which he offered to the pilgrims, indicating by signs that he had nothing else to give. And there is a note right after, coming along the road 6 pilgrims with their staffs, and it says, Martin de Ricoeur indicates that hoodlums and thieves frequently dressed as pilgrims. Uh-oh. They accepted the food very gladly and said, Geld, Geld. There's a note, and it says, money, in German. I don't understand, responded Sancho, what you're asking of me, good people. Then one of them took a purse from his shirt and showed it to Sancho, who then understood that they were asking for money, and he, placing his thumb on his throat and extending his hand upward, gave them to understand that he did not have any money at all, and spurring the donkey, he broke through the line, and as he passed, a pilgrim, who had been looking at him very carefully, rushed toward him, threw his arms around his waist, and said in a loud and very Castilian voice, God save me! What do I see? Is it possible that I have my arms around my dear friend and good neighbor, Sancho Panza? I do, no doubt about it, because I'm not asleep or drunk now. Sancho was amazed to hear himself called by name, and to find himself embraced by a foreign pilgrim, and he looked at him very carefully, not saying a word, but did not recognize him. The pilgrim, however, seeing his bewilderment, said, How is it possible, my brother Sancho Panza, that you don't know your neighbor, Ricote de Moroski? Nope, that is a made-up name that I just made up. Ricote de the Morisco. There we go. A shopkeeper in your village. I'm just like making names up over here. And there is a note, and it says, a person of, let me make sure that I'm in the right one. Yes, a person of Muslim descent living in territory controlled by Christians who had ostensibly and often forcibly been converted to Christianity. Oh my gosh, it's 2:40 a.m. right now. Oh no. Get your sleep, get your sleep. Then Sancho looked at him even more closely and began to recognize his face, and finally knew exactly who he was. And without dismounting, Sancho threw his arms around the man's neck and said, Who the devil could recognize you, Ricote, in the ridiculous disguise you're wearing? Tell me, who turned you into a foreigner, and why did you risk coming back to Spain? It'll be very dangerous for you if they catch you and recognize you. If you don't give me away, Sancho, responded the pilgrim, I'm sure nobody will know me in these clothes. Let's move off the road to that grove of poplars where my companions want to eat and rest, and you can eat with them, for they're very peaceable people. I'll have a chance to tell you what happened to me after I left our village, obeying His Majesty's proclamation that threatened the unfortunate members of my race so severely, as you must have heard. And there is a note right where we left off, and it says, between 1609 and 1613, public proclamations ordered the immediate expulsion from Spain of Moriscos, who were accused of continuing to practice Islam in secret and of having a pernicious influence on Spanish society. You lost your circle of sleep back in 2020. It's fine. Sancho agreed, and after Quixote spoke to the other pilgrims, they set out for the grove of poplars that could be seen at some distance from the king's highway. They threw down their staffs, took off their hooded cloaks or capes, and remained in their shirt sleeves. They were all young and good-looking except for Quixote, who was a man well on in years. All of them carried traveling bags, and all of these, it seemed, were well provisioned, at least with things that call up and summon a thirst from 2 leagues away. They stretched out on the ground, and with the grass as their tablecloth, they set out bread, salt, knives, nuts, pieces of cheese, and bare ham bones that could not be gnawed, but could be sucked. They also set out a black food called caviar that is made of fish eggs and is a great awakener of thirst. And there's a note after caviar, and it says, in contemporary Spanish, the word is spelled caviar. Yeah, the way that it's spelled in the pages is Cabial. There was no lack of olives, dried without any brine, but good tasting and flavorful. What stood out most on the field of that banquet, however, were 6 wineskins, for each of them took one out of his bag, even the good Quixote, transformed from a Morisco into a German, or Teuton. That's not how you say it at all. It's not Teuton. Took out his own wineskin, comparable in size to the other 5. But we're moving on. They began to eat with great pleasure, savoring each mouthful slowly, just a little of each thing, which they picked up with the tip of a knife. And then all at once, and all at the same time, they raised their arms and the wineskins into the air, their mouths pressed against the mouths of the wineskins, and their eyes fixed on the heavens. And as if they were taking aim, they stayed this way for a long time, emptying the innermost contents of the skins into their stomachs, and moving their heads from one side to the other, signs that attested to the pleasure they were receiving. Sancho watched everything, and not one thing caused him sorrow. Rather, in order to comply with the proverb that he knew very well, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, he asked Roconte for his wineskin, and took aim along with the rest, and with no less pleasure than they enjoyed. And there is a note after not one thing caused him sorrow, and it says, this phrase is taken from a ballad that begins, oh no, Nero on Tarpeian rock watched as Rome went up in flames, crying ancients, screaming infants, and not one thing caused him sorrow. The skins were tilted 4 times, but a 5th time was not possible, because they were now as dry and parched as esparto grass, something that withered the joy the pilgrims had shown so far. From time to time, one of them would take Sancho's right hand to his and say, oh no, it is not in English. Apologies in advance. Español y tudeschi tutto uno, bon compagno. And Sancho would respond, bon compagno, j'aurais dit. And he burst into laughter that lasted for an hour, and then he did not remember anything that had happened to him in his governorship, for during the time and period when one eats and drinks, cares tend to be of little importance. Finally, the end of the wine was the beginning of a fatigue that overcame everyone, and left them asleep on their tables and cloths. Only Rocote and Sancho were awake, because they had eaten more and drunk less than the others. Rocote moved away with Sancho to sit on the foot of a beech tree, leaving the pilgrims deep in their sleep, and Quixote, without slipping at all into his Moorish language, said these words in pure Castilian. You know very well, O Sancho Panza, my neighbor and friend, how the proclamation and edict that his majesty issued against those of my race brought terror and fear to all of us. At least, I was so affected. I think that even before the time granted to us for leaving Spain had expired, I was already imagining that the harsh penalty had been inflicted on me and my children. And so I arranged, as a prudent man, I think, and as one who knows that by a certain date the house where he lives will be taken away, and he'll need to have another one to move into, I arranged, as I said, to leave the village alone, without my family, and find a place where I could take them in comfort and without the haste with which others were leaving. Because I saw clearly, as did all our elders, that those proclamations were not mere threats, as some were saying, but real laws that would be put into effect at the appointed time. I was forced to believe this truth because I knew the hateful and foolish intentions of our people, and they were such that it seems to me it was divine inspiration that moved His Majesty to put into effect so noble a resolution. Not because all of us were guilty, for some were firm and true Christians, though these were so few they could not oppose those who were not, but because it is not a good idea to torture a snake in your bosom or shelter enemies in your house. In short, it was just and reasonable for us to be chastised with the punishment of exile, lenient and mild according to some, but for us it was the most terrible one we could have received. No matter where we are, we weep in Spain, for, after all, we were born here, and it is our native country. Nowhere do we find the haven our misfortune longs for, and in Barbary, and all the places in Africa where we hoped to be received, welcomed, and taken in, that is where they most offend and mistrust us. We did not know our good fortune until we lost it, and the greatest desire in almost all of us is to return to Spain. Most of those, and there are many of them, who know the language as well as I do, abandon their wives and children and return, so great is the love they have for Spain. And now I know and feel the truth of the saying that is sweet to love one's country. As I was saying, I left our village, went to France, and though they made us welcome there, I wanted to see everything. I traveled to Italy and came to Germany, and there it seemed to me I could live in greater freedom because the inhabitants don't worry about subtleties. Each man lives as he chooses, because in most places there is freedom of conscience. I took a house in a village near Augsburg. I joined these pilgrims, for many travel to Spain every year to visit the shrines, which they think of as their Indies, as sure profit and certain gain. They travel through most of the country, and they leave every town well fed and well drunk, as they say, and with at least a real in money. And at the end of the trip they have more than 100 escudos left over, which they change into gold coins and hide in the hollows of their staffs, or under the patches of their cloaks, or wherever else they can. And they take them out of this kingdom and into their own countries in spite of the guards at the posts and ports where there are inspections. Now, Sancho, my intention is to take out the treasure I buried here, and since it's outside the village, I'll be able to do it without danger, and then I'll write to my daughter and wife, or leave from Valencia and go to Algiers, where I know they are, and find a way to take them to a French port, and from there to Germany, where we'll wait for whatever God has in store for us. In short, Sancho, I know for a fact that my daughter Ricotta and my wife, Francisca Ricotta, are true Catholic Christians, and though I'm less of one, I'm still more Christian than more, and I always pray that God will open the eyes of my understanding and let me know how I must serve him. What amazes me is not knowing why my wife and daughter went to Barbary instead of France. where they could have lived as Christians. To which Sancho responded, "Look, Ricote, that probably wasn't their decision, because Juan Theopiel, your wife's brother, left with them, and since he's probably a shrewd Moor, he took them to the place he thought best. And I can tell you something else, too. I think it's useless for you to look for what you buried, because we heard that the pearls and gold coins your brother-in-law and your wife were carrying were taken at inspection." "That might be, Sancho," replied Ricote, "but I know they didn't touch what I hid away. I didn't tell them where it was because I feared some calamity. And so, Sancho, if you want to come with me and help me to dig it up and hide it, I'll give you 200 escudos, and with that you can meet all your needs, for you know that I know you have a good many of them." "I'll do it," responded Sancho. "But I'm not a greedy man, because just this morning I left a post where I could have had gold walls in my house and been eating off silver plates in 6 months' time. And for this reason, and because I think it would be treason against my king if I helped his enemies, I wouldn't go with you even if you gave me 400 escudos in cash right here and now, instead of promising me 200 later." "And what post is it that you've left, Sancho?" asked Ricote. "I've left the governorship of an insula," responded Sancho, "one so good that, by my faith, you'd have a hard time finding another like it." "And where is this insula?" asked Ricote. "Where? 2 leagues from here, and it's called Insula Barataria." "That's amazing, Sancho," said Ricote. "Insulas are in the ocean. There's no insula on terra firma." "What do you mean?" responded Sancho. "I tell you, Ricote, my friend, I left there this morning, and yesterday I was there governing to my heart's content, like an archer. But even so, I left it because the post of governor seems like a dangerous one to me." And there is a note after archer, and it says, the word in Spanish is sagitario, which in underworld slang also meant a person who was whipped through the streets by the authorities. Martin de Ricoeur speculates that since this meaning seems out of place here, Sancho may simply be repeating a word he had heard Don Quixote use, or is referring indirectly to the rigor of his governance by alluding to the archers of the Holy Brotherhood who executed criminals at Peralvillo. "What did you get from your governorship?" asked Ricote. "I got," responded Sancho, "the lesson that I'm not good enough for governing unless it's a herd of livestock, and that the riches you can gain in governorships come at the cost of your rest and your sleep and even your food, because on insulas the governors have to eat very little, especially if they have doctors who are looking out for their health." I I don't understand you, Sancho," said Ricote, "but it seems to me that everything you're saying is nonsense. Who would give you insulas to govern? Was there a lack of men in the world more competent than you to be governor? Really, Sancho, come to your senses and decide if you want to come with me, as I said, and help me take out the treasure I hid. The truth is, there's so much it can be called a treasure, and I'll give you enough to live on, as I said." "I already told you, Ricote," replied Sancho, "that I don't want to. Be satisfied that I won't betray you, and go on your way in peace, and let me continue on mine. I know that well-gotten gains can be lost, and ill-gotten ones be lost too, along with their owner." "I don't want to insist, Sancho," said Ricote, "but tell me, did you happen to be in our village when my wife, my daughter, and my brother-in-law left?" "Yes, I was," responded Sancho, "and I can tell you that your daughter looked so beautiful when she left that everybody in the village came out to see her, and they all said she was the fairest creature in the world. She was crying and embracing all her friends and companions, and all those who came out to see her, and asking them all to commend her to God and Our Lady, his mother, and she did this with so much feeling it made me cry, though I'm not usually much of a weeper. By my faith, there were many who wanted to hide her and take her from those she was leaving with, but fear of defying the orders of the kings stopped them. The one who seemed most affected was Don Pedro Gregorio, that rich young man who's going to inherit his father's estate. You know who I mean. They say he loved her very much, and after she left, he's never been He's never been seen in our village again, and we all think he went after them to abduct her, but so far we haven't heard anything." "I always suspected," said Ricote, "that he was wooing my daughter, but I trusted in the principles of my Ricotta, and knowing he loved her never troubled me, because you must have heard, Sancho, that Moriscas rarely, if ever, become involved with old Christians, and my daughter, who, I believe, cared more for being a better Christian than for being in love, would not pay attention to that young gentleman's entreaties." "May it be God's will," replied Sancho, "because that would not be good for either one of them. And now, let me leave here, Ricote, my friend. Tonight I want to reach the place where my master, Don Quixote, is." "God go with you, Sancho, my friend. My companions are beginning to stir, and it's time for us to leave, too." Then the two of them embraced, and Sancho mounted his donkey, and Ricote grasped his staff, and they went their separate ways. End of chapter 54. All right, so in this one, we're barely with Don Quixote. He's just waiting 4 days to have the fight, basically. So then we go back to Sancho, and Sancho is on his way back to the castle, back to Don Quixote, leaving his governorship. And in doing so, he comes across an old neighbor, and the neighbor was sent away because of his supposed beliefs, and saying that that everybody, all of the Muslims, were indoctrinating and not really being Christian, but still, practicing Islam and all these other things, and just things that probably weren't real, like at all. So he had to flee his country, and he left without his family, and he is now journeying back, picking up money that he buried, and to get his family and bring them to Germany while they'll be able to live freely. And Sancho is just like listening to this story, and Rocote is like, "Hey, if you help me, I will pay you." And Sancho's like, "Nah, dude, I'm not a traitor to the king." And then they just go on their separate ways. Well, not before Sancho is like, "No, I was a governor of an insula, and it's too much. It's just too much." And Rocote has like a moment of being like, "Insulas are surrounded by water, and we are definitely on land. What are you talking about?" So there was that moment, and Sancho just like brushes it off and was like, "Nah, like I promise." So now we're back on our way to the village. So we'll see how it goes. But that is going to be it for tonight. So we are leaving off on page 817, and we will start right back up on chapter 50. Yeah, I hope you all have a great night. We will pick this up next week. It'll be great. So with that, thank you all so much for the support. Thank you all for the new follows. So glad that you're here. Welcome in. So good to see you all. Hope you all have a great night. If I don't see you next week, I hope to see you very soon. And as always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you, and I 1000% appreciate your support. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon.